we will listen to this on our own system. So are we live? We are live. Hello, everyone. If you're watching this in the replay, you can fast forward 15 minutes or so, and we'll get started. This is the pre-show. I'm doing some audio tests, so you're going to hear me repeating myself here in just a moment. Hopefully you're going to be hearing something. It's when you don't hear anything that I'm always more concerned about what's going on. So we will see in a moment exactly how long it takes to get this thing going. Can I start it up? Let's see if we can start the live stream. Maybe I should wait on this page. I don't know. Does it automatically start up? It doesn't look like it does. So I'm going to restart this page, refresh it, get it all fresh. It's all fresh and delightful. Let's hit play now and see what we get. We should get something. Does it automatically start up? It doesn't look like it does. So I'm going to restart this page. That's audio. It, get it all fresh. It's a little bit lower than what I usually do, but it's not bad. That's actually pretty good. So we're going to go with this for the time being. Let's update the website, shall we? Let's change the promo bar to be Network Study Group is right now. Right now, click here to join us. And we'll just take people over to the live page because we are live. Let's reset our cookie. And did the cookie reset? I think it did. Save changes. And there we go. Now let's get the chat going. All right. Whoops. Oops. Let's type that. What else do we need to do? I think that's the big thing, is getting those two things done. Should we play around with the audio? I'm concerned because it's hard to adjust the audio. Where is the rate? If I change the rate values here, if I click on the stream audio, I'm afraid I'll blow you out, so I don't want to do that. We're going to keep playing around with it. Maybe we'll mess around with it when we're done today. Hello, chat room. Hello, everybody. Let's get a quiz started up for the Network Plus Study Group and start that. And what else are we doing? I think we're in pretty good shape, really. Let's get this going. That's noisy. What's noisy here? Here it kind of. That's just not tight. That needs to be tighter. So don't touch that. Don't play around with that. Let's do a camera check, shall we? Wouldn't that be fun? There's one camera. Hi. There's camera 2. Camera 3. Actually, camera 3. Camera 4. Camera 4. Camera 2. Camera 1. All right. That's working. We should get a presentation going about the graphics. We didn't do the graphics camera. There it is. And then we've got this. So it's all working. Nice. All right. Is this how we're going to start things? I'm going to start muting people already. We just got into the chat room. We just got things started. Promo bar is set up now, so that's good. Maybe I can empty the cache. Get the cache emptied. Recordings are already going. Are they? Yep. See my Cylons? They're going down there. What else? I think that's the big stuff. I think those are the large things. Okay. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Hello, chat rooms. We've got about, if you join us, we've got about 10 minutes before we get started. This is the pre-show. Or apparently I'm coughing. And audio has always been my thing. So let's check the audio again. I don't know if I'm really happy with where this is. The stream is automatically attenuated. It's automatically set at a lower rate than the normal audio is here. That's on purpose. This is the stream is automatically. See, I'm not sure it's loud enough. I don't think I have enough volume. And I'm looking at the stream here, and it's difficult to see exactly what I want to do with that. So it's where I'm happy with what it's looking like, but I think another 3 dB might be even better. It's just very difficult to get it to move the way I want here. So it's one of those things. Going in and out, now that's a different kind of problem. That's not my issue on this side. It's not going in and out on this side. So that's more you. Time to wipe that sleep right out of your head. That's a different issue. I'm really more concerned about the overall volume level. And I think it's okay now. I think it's usable. It's one on the stream. I just think another 3 dB would have been nice. But controlling the output on this to the stream is very sensitive, and I'm concerned about changing it in the middle of the stream, that it might be an issue. But before we're done today, I will try to remember, let's play around with this at the end. So after the final credit, I'll come back and we'll mess around with the audio and see how it sounds and do all of that, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit louder than it was last week. I'd moved it up another 3 dB. So it's currently, I think ideally, I think what this does is attenuate it about 20 dB down whenever it's sending out on a stream or whenever it's recording, so that you have some headroom whenever you start working with it in post-production. Well, I don't need any headroom. This is live. We're doing it on the stream straight out. So I just need to have it at a volume that is normal. On my side, the volume's great. The volume sounds, fantastic. It's just getting the right levels going out to the stream was something that I need. You don't want plus 30, trust me. Well, the email that's sent out that this is happening will go out in approximately 1.5 minutes. So if you do not get the email informing you, that's because I haven't actually sent it to you yet. I find that sending it more than 5 minutes before the actual event ends up being wasted time. People don't show up. The good time for sending something that an event is beginning tends to be about 5 minutes ahead of time. So that's why you get it 5 minutes ahead of time. And of course, I'm talking like the first 5 minutes is introductions and here's what we're doing today. And so even if you show up 10 minutes after that, you're still catching the show. So, or stick it on your calendar. I keep meaning to integrate this with a Outlook calendar or Google Calendar link, and my calendar function on my website supports that. But because of the method that I use to protect my back-end management system, it doesn't work properly. You would have to have a username and password, which is my username and password, to be able to get that. So that's what that's about. Oh, that's good. Why is it making that noise? Why is it doing that? There's something. That's weird. I don't know where that's coming from. It's not coming from the mic. I'm shaking the mic right now and you can't hear anything. Well, now it's not doing it. I think I need to take my mic apart and adjust the thing with the stuff. Okay, now it's working. See how we fix that? That's so easy when it works that way. Oh, it's the little things, peoples. 5 minutes to go before this thing starts. Let's clear things out. I should hire an IT guy. I have hired many IT people. Everything I do is outsourced, except this. Do you know anybody who could run this? Hard to get someone off the street to make that happen. Yeah, shake it till it stops making the noise. That's your number one troubleshooting tool. Oh, you know what? I need to check one more thing, and I will be right back. Da, 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 da. 3 minutes. Da, 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 da. Ba, 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 ba. All right. 2 minutes or so. Where did I go? What happened? What's going on there? It's all good. It is all good. Just had to run across the compound for a thing that I forgot with the stuff. But now we're better. Now we're fine. All right. Minute to go. What are we doing today? What is all of this about? Did the tweet even go out? I'm not sure it did. This is a problem. This is an issue. Oh, well. The room name for Socrative is Professor Messer, all one word. I'll talk about that in just a moment. You'll be sick of hearing me say it by the time we're done with this study group. I assure you. That's done. Okay. Let's see what we can do here. Recording, streaming. You guys are here. I'm here. I think it's about time to do a study group. Let's begin, shall we? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March 2016 Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions, and hopefully you can give me the answers. It's all interactive. It's all online. I'll show you exactly how to do all of these things as we step through this today. I've taken the questions that you've sent me throughout the week, and I've compiled them into a set of interactive Q&A that we'll go through using some great resources online. I've got some things I think you might know about, some things perhaps you may not know about. So we're going to see how you do. This is something I'm able to do thanks to your support. coming to my site and watching the videos, purchasing my course notes, purchasing my offline videos. You can see all about that at professormesser.com/getnetplus. Now, there's also, of course, constant motion, although I've noticed today my tweets and my Facebooks aren't being sent exactly the way I would like, but generally on a normal day, you can go to professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/Facebooks, professormesser.com/YouTube. Just type professormesser.com/Instagram/ whatever it happens to be. So you can absolutely find what's going on around this site by doing that. Also, don't forget that there is a 10% discount that you can get off of your vouchers before you take your exam. So do not ever pay full price for your CompTIA vouchers. Simply go to professormesser.com/vouchers and use that discount code for 10% off. And our thanks to GTS Learning for providing that voucher code. As I mentioned, the N10006 is now available, 1080p video and closed captioning and MP3 audio, and my course notes are included with this. I put together an entire package where everything is available, and of course, you can find that at professormesser.com/getnetplus. Now, I told you today we're going to be doing Q&A. I'm going to ask you questions, and then you will be able to put in the answer where you are on a separate window. You can pop open a new browser window. You can also load an app on your mobile device or load up the browser on your mobile device. You can, of course, go to professormesser.com and get the details on that on the live site. But I've also got it here on the screen. Socrative.com is this website. So go to Socrative.com, click the student login button. If you're downloading the app, then you'll want to have the student app, not the teacher app. That's my app. You want the student app. That's the one for you. And when you go to that app or you start up Socrative.com and click the student login, type in the room name, Professor Messer. That's what is here in the green, Professor Messer. And you can see that name is PROFESSORMESSER. So make sure you spell it correctly, because if you don't spell it correctly, you're going to find that you're in a room by yourself. There's nothing in front of you, because if you do spell it correctly, you'll see a question like this that says, how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification? And you can see that here you got less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 9 months, 9 months to a year, over a year, or I already have my Network Plus certification. So you should be able to see that. If you don't, go to Socrative.com, just as you see on the screen, click the student login button and go to room Professor Messer. So simple to be able to do this. And then I interactively can see this as you're typing it in. I can't see who you are when you're doing it. So don't feel like I know that you're the one that typed a particular answer, because I don't track that kind of thing. I want you to be able to know if you got it right or wrong. And you can see that as I'm doing that, the numbers will change on the screen dynamically. So we'll be able to see as we go through this and I ask you these Network Plus questions, how you do with these interactively. We'll know immediately how you're doing with this. So you can see right now we've had 62 people have answered already. 45% of you watching have been doing this for less than 3 months. That's usually what I see at the beginning of a calendar year. And being able to do that from 3 to 6 months is 22%, 6 to 9 months is 9%. Over a year, some of us have been doing this. This is how I like to do certification studies, by the way. So I'm in that 12% usually. And some of you already have your Network Plus certification, 10% of you. So if you are watching this and you would like to get continuing education units, I'm talking specifically to these 10%, you obviously can't gather the CEUs until you have the certification. But if you already have it, I'll be giving you a special code word at some point during this presentation, and I'll explain to you exactly how I will give you 1 hour of continuing education units if that is something that you collect. The N10006 certification having a political moment there. The N10006 certification has been around since February 28th of 2015, and they really allowed us to take either this exam, the 006, or the 005 for a very long time. There's a long overlap, but now the 006 is the only one available. By the way, if you are planning to take a Network Plus certification exam, you need to have all the study materials for the N10006. This is one of these things that becomes very important as you're going through the studies, because there are a number of minor things that did change between the 005 and the 006, but those minor things could be just enough to make the difference on your final exam. So that's an important thing to consider when you're putting together all of your study materials. A number of people have said, I've got 005, can I use them? You can, but only to a certain point. You're still going to need to find what's different between those two and make sure you know those things as well. Very important to be able to do that. I think that's also an important consideration with looking at all of the exam objectives, all of your books, all of my videos, because I have videos going back to the N10004. You don't want to watch those. You want to watch the latest one. So make sure that you work through those and have all of those available as well. So let's see what we know about Network Plus. I've got some questions for you. And here's the first one. This one's dealing with something called 802.1x. We were just talking about 802.1x in the chat room before we got started today. This is a question that says, which of these would be most associated with 802.1x? And of course, I'm not asking you what 802.1x is. I'm giving you a list of protocols and different things, I guess, and you have to tell me of these protocols, which two of these, because you can see it says pick two, which two of these would be most associated with 802.1x? Would it be RDP? Would it be Radius? Would it be LDAP? Would it be SQL? Would it be HTTPS? Would it be SMTP? Or would it be NFS? I gave you a bunch here, so I'm really not making this very easy. Couldn't I have just given three things, and you could have chosen two out of this list? Well, no. You're going to have to go through here and figure these pieces out. I think there are two good answers here. And I did mention, by the way, in the writing of this text of the question, which of these would be most associated with 802.1x? This is a very common way that the CompTIA exam tends to ask these questions, is they're asking you for the most possible best thing. The answers could actually have more than one that could be correct, but they're looking for the best one. In this case, the one that would be most associated. Don't answer in the chat room. You should answer by going to Socrative.com, clicking on the student login, going to the room Professor Messer. Once you're in the room, you don't have to do anything. Now, I apologize for the people that are watching this on the replay, because in the replay, you can't participate with the live Q&A. So if you're watching this on the replay and you go to Socrative and it's not showing this, that's because we're not live right now. I usually do these on noon Wednesday Eastern time in the United States. So that's where you would get the times and the dates. And you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and get the responses for this as well. So let's see how we did with this one. And I'm looking for really, because there's two, I'm looking for a 50-50. Or I guess ideally a 25-25. So let's look at what the two most popular are. Radius got 35%. In second place would be LDAP at 18%. But right behind it, RDP is at 13%. NFS is at 10%. HTTPS is also at 10%. And the others are at single digits. So this is one where we really do need to understand what the protocols are and what they do. It's not enough to know that there's a certain port number associated with a protocol. You have to really understand behind the scenes what these protocols are doing. So for 802.1x, which is a well-used set of protocols in the enterprise, it's something that is used constantly, especially on wireless networks, but it's certainly something you can find on wired networks as well. 802.1x allows you to do something called NAC. You may see this written as port-based network access control, but generally speaking, this is network access control, which means that you must authenticate before you are even getting access to the network. This is something we don't really do at home. At home, we take our computer, we plug it into the network, or we connect to the wireless network, and we're on the network. We might have to provide some encryption keys, but we don't have to authenticate with a username and password. We simply are on the network. If somebody needs access to a network, we can plug them into the Ethernet network, and they're on the network. In fact, in most environments, that's how it works. There are some very specific kinds of environments where you see NAC being used more than others. It's common to see this being used in hospitals. It's common to see NAC being used on college campuses. because you just don't want people plugging into a network connection and getting full access to whatever that VLAN provides. So this is something you can use in conjunction with a set of protocols to be able to send this username and password to a centralized database that will check to see your username and password is correct. You need some type of authentication protocol. And there are a number of well-used authentication protocols in the world. Some of the most common are Radius, LDAP, TACAX Plus. You can find Kerberos is one of the most popular because that's what Microsoft uses. That goes well beyond just being an authentication protocol, of course. But these are very common things to use. If you are setting up a wireless access point and you want to turn on NAC, then you also need a server that can provide Radius functionality or a server that's able to do LDAP. For example, the Microsoft Active Directory can also provide access to that Active Directory through LDAP. It's a very common way. If you're configuring one of these types of systems to authenticate, then you can have them authenticate against your very popular and well-used Active Directory database. And then because you're using LDAP, it's a very standard way to communicate back and forth. So you configure your wireless access points to talk 802.1x standardization to an LDAP database, which also happens to be on your Active Directory side. So that's a very common example of how this is used in the real world, out there in the enterprise today. It's a very common way to make that happen. I think that's one of the things whenever I start working through these details is how do I apply this weird name and protocol to something that's happening in the world? This is a very good example of how you would use those things in the world. So well done. If we go back and look at how we did, the number 1 and 2 here, most popular responses, for example, are Radius and LDAP. Those are the correct answers. B Radius and C LDAP are the ones most associated with 802.1x. RDP is remote desktop protocol. That's obviously something not used for authentication. It's used for management of a remote desktop. Squirrel, as we say here in the southern U.S., or SQL, as some other people like to call it. SQL is a database protocol, so that's not something that would be done. HTTPS is the secure web, the hypertext transfer protocol secure. SMTP used for mail, simple mail transfer protocol. It's not something you would commonly use to authenticate either. That's used to transfer mail between mail servers. And NFS, the network file system, that's something that you would use to mount a remote drive and use it as if it was local on your machine, except obviously you're using it across the network. Very common to see on POSIX type environments, Linux, Unix, Mac OS, that type of thing. So there's a good example of how 802.1x can help us is with the Radius protocol and the LDAP protocol. So well done. You folks did very well with those two and getting them right. If you didn't get it right, that's okay, because now you've learned all about this 802.1x and this LDAP, and you'll get it right next time. Let's move on to the next question then. We're going to shift gears a little bit and get more into troubleshooting. So this question deals with something called an OTDR. And the question specifically is, which of these would be the best use of an OTDR? It's got to be the best use. Again, I'm asking for the best thing. And I've given you a list of things that you can choose from for the OTDR side. Would this best use of an OTDR be to determine the IP routes between two devices? Would it be to locate the end of a cable run? Would it be to determine the dB light loss across a fiber connection? Would it be to verify the pinouts of a cable connection? Or would it be to determine the AC voltage of a wall outlet? One of these will be the best use of an OTDR. If you think you know the answer, do not answer in the chat room. You should instead go to Socrative.com to the student login. If you're already there, then it automatically popped up on the screen for you, and you can go to room name Professor Messer. For those of you asking, I mentioned earlier that LDAP and Radius and TACAX Plus were common authentication protocols. And it's ones where you just kind of decide yourself how you want to do it. Radius and TACAX Plus tend to be very simple authentication protocols. You're asking for a username and password and getting it back. Both Radius and TACAX have different things you can add on to that to add additional details. LDAP is very detailed. It tells you everything about a user. You can really query a lot of information into the database because it's designed to be this big database of user information, whereas TACAX and Radius are really just designed to provide authentication. It's one of those things you need something simple, get it set up. Radius obviously is something that is more open and available and more devices will support it, whereas TACAX Plus is Cisco proprietary, and you'll find really just Cisco devices communicating using TACAX Plus I think it's one very common thing to do. So let's look at this question dealing with an OTDR. I'm not only asking you what an OTDR is, which you have to know to be able to answer this question, but I'm asking you how you would use it. So I'm not really asking you for a very simple thing here. I'm asking you for a couple of steps that you have to go through this list of what would be the best use for an OTDR. Well, in this case, I really try to shoot for 50% of you knowing the answer to these. In this case, I think we have one that's well above 50. 81% said that it's how you determine the dB light loss across a fiber connection. But is it really? Sometimes what we think is the right answer may not be the right answer. We should investigate this further because 13% said it's to locate the end of a cable run. And then you have single digits, and 0 says determine the AC voltage of a wall outlet. So let's talk about an OTDR and what it does. It'd be useful to have this here. This is a device that is used for providing a lot of details about what's happening on a wire or fiber. You'll sometimes see this referred to as a time domain reflectometer, which is a TDR, or an OTDR, which is an optical time domain reflectometer. And it's that O that makes all the difference. Being able to plug into a fiber connection means that it's going to be a very expensive device to be able to use. These are usually something that's in the thousands of dollars that you are purchasing. Sometimes you're renting them because they're just so expensive. The OTDR obviously going to provide you with light information and details about what's happening on the optical side of things. And there is extensive information inside of these. You almost need separate training to be able to run a TDR or an OTDR properly and understand what it's telling you, which is, I think, the harder part. It's very easy to plug in wires and click the go button, but interpreting what it's telling you is often the more difficult thing. These are, though, very, very powerful. They'll tell you everything about layer 1. They'll tell you everything that's happening with your copper if it's a TDR, or everything that's happening across your fiber if it's an OTDR. It will tell you there are breaks. It will tell you that there are that you're losing light from one end to the other and how much light you're losing between one side or the other. It's very common to use these once you do a cable installation or a fiber installation. And the last thing you do is plug in your TDR or your OTDR and start measuring the results across every single connection you put in. And if you're someone who has asked someone to provide this for you, they'll usually give you a report at the end that tells you for each one of these things, for each connection 1, connection 2, connection 3, connection 4, here are the results of the tests, and these qualify as a category 5 connection, a category 6. This runs fiber and loses this much light over the connection. Very common to take advantage of those. So in this particular question, I asked very specifically about an OTDR. I said, what would be the best use of an OTDR? This was a TDR. It would be to verify the pinouts of a cable connection, maybe even locate the end of a cable run, although both of those are really overkill for a TDR. TDR is telling you how much signal loss, how much near-end crosstalk you're getting, very detailed. But because I specifically asked for an OTDR, the 79% of you got this one absolutely right. Just one of the things that an OTDR can do is to determine the dB light loss across a fiber connection. And boy, that can really come in handy if you're connecting devices. The specifications for the routers, the switches, the servers, the things you're connecting to this fiber connection will tell you how much light it needs to be able to receive to be able to properly interpret the signal that's coming in. So if you have a very long distance between two buildings and you're wondering, I'm sending a signal from a particular device and it's coming all the way through, am I really going to be able to hear this on the other side? The results of the OTDR should absolutely be able to tell you this, which is why it's so important to get those values. Whenever somebody does a fiber installation for you, they're going to hand you that sheet of paper and make sure you get it. So very good. If you answered C, you got that one absolutely right. Let's do another one. We got it going on now. So we've got questions that are coming, and I've got plenty here for you. And this one deals with more security. When I asked a couple days ago on the Twitter and on the Facebook, I asked folks, tell me what questions you would like. A lot of people said, I want more security questions. So I put one of these in here. This one is asking about security controls. Which of these security controls would be the best choice to prevent physical access to a database server? So which one of these would be the best choice? Again, it's that language that they use on the exam, the best choice to prevent physical access to a database server. Many of these answers will prevent physical access, but I'm asking for a very specific scenario. So would the answer be a VPN? Would it be a man trap? Would it be 802.1q? Would it be video surveillance? Could it be a network closet? Or might it be multi-factor authentication? So this is one where it would be very useful to know which one of these would be the best choice to prevent physical access to a database server. It's kind of hard to see there with my head there, but you know what the question is. If you think you know the answer to this question, go to Socrative.com to the room named Professor Messer, and you, of course, can answer this yourself. I'm going to take a sneak peek. In fact, you can't see me sneaking a peek at these things to see what's there, and I think this is working exactly the way I expected. Not really. It never works exactly the way I expected. It's so true, being able to work through these things and how they operate. So let's see. Some of you are still answering this one and working through these things. You know, we were talking about TDRs and OTDRs, and there was, I'm going to talk in the after show about a thread I saw on Reddit this past week where somebody really just needed a cable tester. And you can literally buy cable testers for $10 because a cable tester is only going to tell you what pin is connected to what pin across a run. That's one of those that really does come in handy, is knowing those things, but that's so different than a TDR. You may not necessarily need to even know the crosstalk information and signal loss and light loss. You just want to know if it's connected. That can be your first big challenge. Such a simple thing like a cable tester can really take care of that. So let's see how we did with this one. For security controls, which would be the best to prevent physical access to a database server? Well, we're sort of torn on this one. Let's go to the number one on the list. Not quite 50%, but still a large number. The highest number is network closet. But we have 30% that said a man trap would be the best way to prevent physical access to a database server. And coming in number 3, very close behind, is multi-factor authentication. Now you can see here that VPN, 802.1q, and video surveillance got single digits. So maybe we'll throw those out and we'll really focus on these 3, understanding protection of these network closets. In fact, it was, I keep going back to Reddit. I must be spending too much time on Reddit because I read an article today. Somebody posted a note today, not really an article. There was a post where someone talked about being in a doctor's office, and the literally a closet, like a janitor's closet, was right next to the waiting room. And they opened it because the door was unlocked, and all their servers and their networking equipment was in there. So someone had physical access to all of those things that were running their doctor's office, the medical records and everything else. And now they were able to touch these things. They had the physical access. This is the challenge, is you want to prevent anyone from being able to touch the equipment. And that's because if you can gain physical access to a server, you can, through a number of different mechanisms, circumvent the security on that device. You might use a boot disk. You might be able to use a boot USB drive, reboot the system, and now you have access to the operating system. Now, obviously, if you have access to the operating system, you have access to everything that's inside of it. That's why keeping physical security is so important on these devices. Nobody should be able to touch these. Nobody should be able to reboot them. Nobody should be able to plug in a disk or a USB drive. That's a really big problem. This is also how you maintain uptime and availability, because you're able to control the environment it's in. Probably not so much if it's literally in a janitor's closet. Hopefully you have a data center, or you have a room that you can control the temperature, and you can monitor that temperature, and you can control who comes in and out of that room, even if it's a physical door lock. And that's the real key, is the access control associated with these. You don't want anybody to gain access into these rooms. Now, there are a number of ways to provide physical access to a particular room. And I gave you a very good example of these. Obviously, to protect a database server, the answer here is going to be having it in a network closet or a type of data center. So this is where, whenever we start working through these and trying to break through some of these challenges, network closet is really the piece. If we're trying to break through and get to a system, this would not be something protected with a man trap. A man trap protects an entire building. It's something that is putting you in a special holding area before you can access a larger area. And not all data centers have man traps on them. Some do, but generally the man trap is in the front of the building, because man traps are relatively expensive. They're something that you're really controlling a large group of people going in and out. So this would not be the correct answer. Man-trap would not. Multi-factor authentication is a digital access control. It's something where you're providing a username, a password, and some other type of information. Maybe it's something you know, or something you own, or something you are. Those types of multi-factor authentication aren't really protecting you from physical access to a database server. The database server has to be put somewhere away from you to provide that physical access control. And in this case, if you answered E, network closet, that would be the correct answer for any of these. So you know that if there's a way to prevent access to servers and you're wondering why is it always locked behind a door, this is why, because that is the best way to prevent access to those. If you answered E, you got that one absolutely correct. One of the things that in the chat room folks are talking about is having quite a bit of information on the exam. A lot of details around the exam. And obviously, as you go through my videos, you may even be taking notes so that you can have all of this information in one central place. But I also want to let you know that I've already done this for you. I've taken all of my videos, I've gone through every single video of mine, and I've created a series of notes that has all of the graphics, all of the bullets that are important, all of the text that's very detailed, and I've got them all in one single PDF file. So instead of having pages and pages, I've really consolidated it down to a very specific PDF and being able to view this. This is a 15-page PDF that leads to a lot of information that you can look through. And it has everything. Subnetting is on here. I've got details about encryption and proxies and the different topologies. Here is the virtual private networking overview, the DHCP process, DNS resolution. It's all in this PDF. I've taken all of these details and all of this text and all of my graphics and all of the pictures, and it's all in here. Fortunately, it's something that's also economical too. So if you're someone who wants to be able to also contribute back to the website, since all of my videos are available for free, this is also a great way to do that as well. They're only $10, and it's something that's available immediately when you purchase this. It's a digital download PDF, and it's something that you can put on all of your different devices. I've licensed this to be a lot like a book. So if you're the only one who owns this, you could put it on all of your devices because obviously you can only read, you're the only one who can read it at any particular time. So have it on your computer, put it on your mobile device, put it on your tablet. So wherever you are, you'll be able to learn the information that you'll need to know for your Network Plus exam. This obviously doesn't replace a book. It doesn't replace the videos. It doesn't replace the other things you're doing, but it is a great thing to use before you walk into your exam and after you've gone through the heavy study part and you just want to know the top level things. What do I need to know before I walk in the room? And this is a great thing to know. If you would like to know more about this and read all about it and see these thumbnails and be able to understand what's associated with the course notes, it's all at professormesser.com/NPCN. And I want to thank everyone who has purchased these already. It goes a long way to keeping the website up and running and keeping everything going here at Messer Studios. Thank you so much. Let's go now to another question, shall we? This is a performance-based question. So, of course, CompTIA on your exam might ask you to fill in the blank. They might ask you to do matching. They might pop you onto a command line and ask you to type things into a command line. And here's a fill in the blank. Give me an example of a Class C IP address. So you've now got to figure one out. So obviously you're going to need to know what Class C is to be able to do this. And you can put anything in here, but it has to be a valid Class C address for you to be able to answer this. So if you think you know the answer, go to Socrative.com, go to room name Professor Messer, and you'll be able to answer this one as well. And most of you are doing a very good job with these and plugging these in. In fact, I'm getting almost 100%. You folks know your Class C addresses. Let's see. Okay, maybe 99%. There's always one of you, right? 99% got this one right. But you're doing overall, you're doing pretty good. It's nice to have a free form answer for once, isn't it? You just type in whatever makes sense here. You've got a lot of leeway. There's no multiple choices that you would have to choose from. On the Network Plus exam, you have to know about network classes. And although the concept of a class is one that is very outdated at this point, it's still one that helps you apply what a default subnet mask might be when you start doing subnetting. This is one, for instance, people trying to understand why were these classes even created. When we first started doing networking with IP, there was no subnet mask that you would put in. We're so used now, tell me your IP address and your subnet mask and your default gateway. But in the beginning, you didn't even put a subnet mask. The subnet mask was automatically determined based on the IP address that you were putting into your system, which makes a lot of sense. And we use these classes to describe what the default subnet mask might be. But of course, we need a lot more than what the classes were providing. We needed a way to split the networks up in very different ways. So of course, today, we don't necessarily use this class-based subnetting system. Instead, we're doing more of a CIDR block type of variable length subnet masking. But of course, we need to know what the defaults are so we know where the starting point is when we start doing some of these subnetting tasks. It becomes very useful to be able to do that. And a lot of you have done very well with this. Some of you have said, I have no idea. Some of you said it's an address that belongs to C-class celebrities. I guess if you're reaching, perhaps that would be the correct response. But most of you, I think, have done a very good job at providing. Most of these are private IP addresses, so you're very good. You're very knowledgeable with your Class C addresses. In fact, I'm going to show. Don't have any names up. Here's a good example of just some of them. 192.123.12.12, 192.168, something we all know. The 192 network is a very common one. Some of you went off the 192s. We're giving another one, like a 194 address, which would still apply to a Class C address, being able to work through some of these. Now, when you start looking at the different addresses, though, this is where you start getting into trouble, though, because when you get into above a certain number, then Class C isn't going to apply anymore. So, of course, I have a chart for this. If you go back to my video that talks about class-based networking, you'll see that a Class A is the numbers between, the first octet is between the number 1 and the number 126. Technically, I guess it's one that has a leading bit of 0xxx. As if we're going to do the binary math in that first octet, the first 4 bits will have 0xxx on it, which means the highest number you could ever get is 126. If you have 10xx and you did the binary math there, and you put a bunch of zeros all the way to a bunch of ones after that, you would have a range between 128 and 191. But Class C means the first octet is going to be between 192 and 223. So the folks in here that answered 224, the folks that answered, even some of you said 223, you went all the way to the end range and started working through those as well. You got that one absolutely right too. So it could be anything that's in that range between 192 and 223 as the first octet. So very useful to have that there. And it's a very common class, a very common way to describe how we use these subnets on our networks these days. And it's one you'll find, especially on your home networks, these home firewalls, these home routers you get. It might be a 192.168 network, but even at work, a lot of organizations use a 192.168 because it's a very common network to use, and they can just put a lot of different Class C addresses in their environment, and they're in good shape. Now, notice in the chat room, somebody even said, wait a second, you went from 126 to 128. Hold on, where's 127? That should be in there if we're doing our calculations here of Class A. But the 127 network address is reserved, as I said, way down here at the bottom, 127.0.0.0/8 network is reserved as a loopback address. So that's why 127 is not in this list. It's always going to be an IP address that's internal to your device that you will be able to ping, and you'll be able to see at least if the IP subsystem that's running in your operating system is working properly. If you can't ping 127.0.0.1, then you have some serious problems with the IP configuration on your computer, and you're probably not even going to be able to talk to anybody else that's out there on the network. Now, technically, the entire subnet should be responding to you. You should be able to ping 127.7.7.7, for example, and it's supposed to respond back to you, but I've seen different operating systems don't necessarily do that. 127.0.0.1 should always respond back to you. So that's one where you will always be able to have that there and be able to work with those. So good job on the Class C. Most of you got this one right. I'm going to say 99% of you got this one correct. You folks know your Class C addresses quite well. Let's do another one, shall we? Let's do some troubleshooting. Let's troubleshoot a problem dealing which of these would be the result of wireless interference caused by a microwave oven. Well, I'm asking for a very specific example of this kind of thing. So feel free to go into this list. We can see that we need to understand how a microwave oven might cause this type of interference. Would this cause overlapping wireless channels? Would it cause network saturation? Would it cause a decreased signal to noise ratio? Would it cause signal bounce? Or would it cause spread spectrum communication? One of these would be the result of wireless interference caused by a microwave oven. So if you think you know the answer, go to Socrative.com and click on the student login if you're not there already, and go to the Professor Messer room. You can answer it yourself unless you're watching the replay, at what point you won't see anything happening there. It'd be kind of boring. You're wondering, why am I watching this and nothing's happening? Because we're not live. You can only do the Socrative when you were live, unfortunately. I wish there was a way to do it when we weren't live. You'd be able to participate even then. If you're wondering when we're live, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar, or click the calendar link at the top of the page, or view the calendar links that are on the right sidebar of the page. And there is a very good example of how that's. Yeah, you can try this yourself. Grab some popcorn, put it in your microwave oven, and see what the results are for you as well. It'd be a good way to do it, I think, and being able to work through these. I always like going through and working this out practically. So let's plug it in, and at the end you've got popcorn. So that's really not a bad gig if you're trying to figure these pieces out. Let's see how we did, though, with this one, working this piece of it. Which of these would be the result of wireless interference caused by a microwave oven? Well, we do have a majority on this one, at least. 55% of you said it would decrease your signal to noise ratio. Although we've got really a three-way tie for second. So really it might even be one of these. We've got overlapping wireless channels, network saturation, and signal bounce. And then 9% have said spread spectrum communication. I have to say that very carefully when you're working through those. So wireless interference, especially as it relates to a microwave oven. This is a significant issue, actually. Microwave ovens, especially the cheap ones that they put into that you have at work or maybe even at home, they really can put out a lot of interference when they're on. Very common to see this. And for those of you that are wondering what other things can cause a problem, here's just a small list of the types of things that might cause a problem. A fluorescent light, a cordless telephone, something that's a high power source can cause problems, and being able to work through those. This is a very common thing to find when you've got wireless networks and all of these radio signals going around, is that one thing can cause a problem for everybody that's on that wireless network. It can also be pretty unpredictable if you're in a large building and there's multiple tenants. You don't have control over what types of high power sources, cordless telephones, microwaves they happen to be using. That's a bit of an issue. And you can often really even see what the measurement of the signal loss might be through a number of different options. Performance monitor, there's a number of customized applications you can get that can measure it at a wireless level. But this is really where the problem is that now there's more noise. So the amount of noise and the ratio of that to the amount of signal is going to be much closer. You would like that ratio to be very big. You would like there to be a signal difference between the signal and the noise from 1/1,000,000th. That would be nice. 1 to 1,000,000, 1 to 100,000. As it becomes closer to 1 to 1, that means there's just as much noise as there is signal. You don't want that. You want more noise or less noise than you have signal. You want a lot more signal so that you can get those signals going through. As it gets closer to 1 to 1, there's obviously a bigger problem. You want this to decrease the amount of noise that's going to be on there. So therefore, you'll be increasing the ratio. So as you're decreasing this, it's obviously going to be a problem. That means those of you that answered that you have a decreased signal to noise ratio, yeah, this is going to put a lot more noise out there in the world, make that ratio much smaller, coming closer and closer and closer to 1 to 1. So the 48% of you that answered decreased signal to noise ratio, nice job on that one, getting the correct answer and understanding it's just putting out a bunch of noise. It's not overlapping wireless channels. You would have to very specifically be communicating on a particular frequency. The microwave ovens, they just blast it out on a big range of frequencies. So they're not really focusing on overlapping any wireless channels. And obviously, they're not sending any 802.11 wireless signals from your microwave. If you are, you've got a whole different kind of weird thing going on there. It's not network saturation. Network saturation is when everybody's communicating and sending valid information all at the same time, and you're overwhelming the amount of available space in the frequencies that you're using. Signal bounce would not be the issue. This is when you have devices and things in your environment. Maybe it's a filing cabinet or concrete or a window, and the frequencies are bouncing around inside of your environment. That's not our problem. Our problem is just a bunch of noise hitting the world. And spread spectrum communication is a very common way for things like 802.11b networks to communicate. It's a way that they communicate. It's a basic function of the way that a working wireless network would operate. So that's not the answer either. The answer was C, decreased signal noise ratio. If you answered C, you got it absolutely right. Nicely done. All right, time for a picture question. I love picture questions. What's this? What kind of connector is this? I'm not looking for a broad. I'm looking for a very specific answer. In fact, I give you some possibilities. So I'm giving you really just a bunch of letters I threw together. It's letters like F, LC, SC, MTRJ, FC, ST. Really? Well, actually, every single one of those every single one of these is a real connector type. I really didn't make them up. They are all legitimately a real connector type. Almost all of them. Practically all of these are real connector types. So you need now to understand what kind of connector this is. Yeah, if you did in your A+, some of you know this connector type because you've worked with it before. You should be able to go in here and immediately click, oh, yeah, I know what that one is. In fact, it has a very particular shape and function and the way that it works. Yeah, I really can't rotate that around. It looks exactly the same on the other side, although there is probably on the other side of this, there's a little connector, a little notch on the side of it. So you can put that up there and work with it. One of those I like to go through, being able to operate those things. See if you know what the answers are. Feel free to go to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room, be able to work through those as well. Make sure you know what those are and being able to work through them. I like being able to work with a lot of different fiber types. And what you'll find is that if you work at all with fiber, all of your devices, for some reason, have a completely different connector on them. So it's very common for you to be ordering fiber on this side has one type of connector. The other end of the fiber has a completely different connector on it. That is not an unusual thing. So you'll find that's a very common thing for you to work through. And it's one where you'll undoubtedly order the wrong thing, and now you've got fibers you can't use because you have nothing that has those connectors on the other ends of them. And ideally, that's what you want to do. You don't want to have a converter on the end because every time you put a connection or a converter on the end, you lose light. If it's all in the same room, you're probably okay. But usually that's a bad best practice. Usually you want a direct run of fiber from one end to the other. Let's see how we did with this one. I noticed there was a number of different responses, and even someone responded in the chat room and got it wrong in their response. So you do have to be careful there. First, don't answer in the chat room. And you might even want to have a look and make sure you know what you're saying when you put that in there. If we look at what number one is, obviously not a majority, but very close to it, about 46%. Again, I'm shooting for 50 here. SC was the answer that 46% said. Clearly in second place, LC as the connector type. We've got FC is 13%, well, really ST, 15%, basically tied, I guess. 15 and 13% is FC as well, being able to work through those. And really single digits, we got MTRJ and F. Apparently you folks know what MTRJ is and F because you said this is not it at all. So the question then becomes, what is this then? Well, let's have a look at it. Here's a good example of what this happens to be, being able to work through those. This is a very good example of an SC connector. SC connector, you will be able to tell very quickly what it is because it is a square connector. That's how I remember the SC part of it, is the square connector side of it. It's very square. You can see, since we rotated it around now, this is a rotated view, you can see the little notch that's on the side of it. That notch lines up with a notch that's in the device you're plugging it into. So it will only go in, even though it's square, it will only go into that connection one way. So you'll find it's a lot like inserting a USB connector where you insert it, it's the wrong way, and you turn it around and it's still the wrong way, and you turn it back the way it was originally, it works. I don't know why that happens that way, but that's how it works. You'll find when you're struggling with getting all these fiber connectors in, that's exactly the way it will work. Nope, that's not the notch. That's not the notch. No, I had it right the first time. And it's very easy. Sometimes they will have this connector around them. You'll often see them shown like this. This is just a plastic connector that is combining them, putting them together so they're just matched up together. This becomes useful with fiber because with fiber, you're often running it in pairs. One pair is the transmit going one direction. One pair is the receive coming the other direction. Now, the challenge is if you're plugging in on one side, transmit, receive, the transmit has to plug into the receive on the other side. So if they're loose, like this one over here, you have to remember which side is which so that you can plug them in properly on the other side. Sometimes the fiber will only have writing on one side of the fiber so that at the other end, which might be 100 meters away, you're able to tell which one was this. Oh yeah, I plugged it into transmit on that side, so the piece with the writing on it goes to receive on this side. Or if you're smart, you've already done that by putting one of these plastic connectors around it, and now there's only one way to plug it in on both sides, which makes it so much easier if you're working with fiber and getting that to work through those connectors. Yeah, it clicks in there, and so it has a nice solid connector to be able to work through those pieces. You could very well have pictures as part of the exam. Yes, so in the chat room, folks are asking about that. They could very possibly give you a list of pictures. They might give you 5 different fiber connectors on the screen and give you 5 different acronyms, and now you're going to have to match those up. There's a good example of a performance-based question. On the CompTIA YouTube channel, there is a video on taking the CompTIA exam, where they take you through the process, they show you the user interface, and they give you some examples of what some of the questions and the answers might be. So make sure you go through the process of looking at those as well. It comes in handy to be able to know exactly what you may be faced with when you sit down for the exam. You don't want this to be a situation where you walk in and you have no idea what you could expect on the exam. It's really nice to at least get a feel for what the questions might look like, what the user interface is like. They step through and show you how to use the flag function so you can flag the different options and the different things available to you. It's a really nice way to work through those different options and have them there. And being able to work with them is really useful because I hate walking into an exam and not knowing what I'm going to be faced with. So make sure you have a look at that video. I may even be able to show it before we're done today. So going back to the answers, obviously SC is our answer. If you answered SC, the 47% of you got that one absolutely correct. Nice job on that one. Well, there is quite a bit to know on Network Plus. And obviously you've got everything from subnetting to you have to understand pieces of VPNs. You have to understand some security and encryption. You got to understand how to connect all these devices together. You got to understand how to make things route. You got to understand routing tables. There's so much that is so practical. And I think more than any other exam, being able to sit down and plug in a network and configure an operating system and understand how to look at these routing tables becomes really important. And I like the GTS Learning Practice Labs to be able to do this because they've already set up labs to be able to make this work. You can find out about this at professormesser.com/netlabs. These labs are set up. Here's understanding network protocols, ARP and ICMP. Here's another one for other protocols, DHCP and DNS servers, understanding network protocols, creating VPNs and virtual machines, how software as a service works, VPN servers, configuring internet connections and DNS settings. You can click into these and you now have a bunch of computers that you can now click a power button and begin powering on these virtual devices. Some of these are routers, some of these are web servers, some of these are Windows workstations, some are domain controllers. And I don't have to have any additional software running on my computer. I don't have to have any operating systems. I don't have to have any code. In fact, all of the modern browsers that use HTML5 will be able to use this and communicate back. These all include labs, kind of hard to see with my big head in the way there. But you can see that there's labs available for you to look at as well. Here's the lab. And I can break it out as a separate window and putting it all on one screen so you have a feel for what this looks like. And it takes you through step one, reconfigure the IP network bindings. It shows you visually what you need to do so that you can get accustomed to how you would do this in the operating system and keep a good feel for how these different pieces work. While this is all booting up and you have these systems starting up, you're now able to move from one operating system to another virtually. I'm doing this in real time, so it's literally starting up right now. And now we're going to have all of your domain controllers and everything else ready to go. So the domain controller is now booted. Here's my Windows device. It's a full Windows machine. This is not an emulation or a simulation. It's exactly as if you loaded up a domain controller in your environment, and now you can step through all of the different network settings and using this from a network perspective and make the changes that they're asking for in the lab that you happen to be working with. And this, of course, has other operating systems. There's a Windows device here. There's a Windows 7. This looks like it's another machine that's set up to a server 2002. I've got a router here. Obviously, the router is when running Linux. You don't have direct access to that or the web server, but you are able to configure the device. And if the lab works, you can access the router, you can access the web front end, and you can see the different things that are doing. Also, keep in mind that all of these are available to try out for free. You can run this for an hour to do this for free. Go to professormesser.com/netlabs, scroll down to the bottom, and you can fill out the demonstration on the GTS Learning site. Another nice thing about this is that there's a special price if you go through this link. If you go to the GTS Learning site, it costs more money. So they were nice enough to be able to give us a little bit of a discount if you follow professormesser.com/netlabs. And I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning for supporting us as well. We really wouldn't be able to do this without some of the things they provide for us. Well, we've got more questions to go through, so let's absolutely do that. I'm going to flip through my list of questions that I have here. Let's get another one in before we run out of time. This is one that's really going to ask if you know acronyms. One of the things we talked about this week with the Network Plus exam in our chat room is, boy, there's a lot of acronyms. And it's kind of the nature of the beast with networking. In networking, we do tons of acronyms. So there's really no other way to talk about all of these different things. You saw in the last one, all of those different fiber connectors are really different connectors, all just a bunch of letters. Well, similar question here. In which of these situations would you use DAI? And fortunately, I've given you some examples of which you could choose from. Would it be to prevent SQL injections? Would it be to increase the total network throughput? Would it be to convert from copper to fiber? Would it be to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks? Or would it be to locate the ends of a network run? Which of these situations would you use DAI? If you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You should instead answer on Socrative. Go to Socrative.com to the Professor Messer room, and you can answer, in which of these situations would you use DAI? Oh, this is a good one. Nobody knows what DAI is. This is one that is on the exam. And I want to say this is something that is specific to the N10006. I don't think this is on the N10005 exam. So this is something you definitely need to know on the 006 exam. See, somebody just watched the video. Good. I know you got this one right then. Stop Googling DAI. I see you doing it. I'm watching you. I can see it. I can feel it. I can feel you typing it into the Google machine. Stop that. You need to guess. Pretend you're taking the exam and they just threw it at you. If you're taking your Network Plus exam, you don't get, there's no penalty for making a guess and getting it wrong. So you should try to answer every possible question, even if you don't know what it is, because you could get it right. There's obviously a 20% chance here that you could get this correct. So make sure that you're able to at least go through every possible multiple choice question and at least answer them. If you're running out of time, there's 60 seconds left, just go through and mark A on all of them. I don't know. Just take a guess. Christmas tree it. Try to at least fill it in. You may make it an extra point or two that could get you over a particular line, and that's a pretty important thing. So let's see how we did with this. In which of these situations would you use DAI? How do we do? Well, we did a little crazy. We did We got a little bit of everything in here. What would it be? Would it be to, well, 39% of you said prevent man-in-the-middle attack. So I think that's probably more than any of the others that are here right now. And it's close to 50. 23%, a solid number two, said it would increase total network throughput. 16%, 14%, kind of tied for third, would be to prevent squirrel injections or to convert from copper to fiber. And then 8% said locate the ends of a network run. Well, DAI is actually something that does come in handy. It's called Dynamic ARP Inspection, DAI. ARP is a very powerful thing. It's, in fact, we have to have ARP on our IPv4 networks to be able to communicate from one device to another, because it's going to allow us to understand what the MAC address of that device might be on the other side. That's one of the ways to use ARP. ARP has a lot of different functions. There's many different kinds of ARP, but that's one of the most common. But the problem with ARP is there is zero security associated with ARP. No security whatsoever. So that becomes a problem. Somebody could sit in the middle of a communication, see you requesting an ARP request, and then it doesn't allow the response from the real respondent. Instead, it sends its own response out. And when that happens, it's a man-in-the-middle attack. This is somebody who's sitting in the middle that is changing the answers before they get to you, and therefore now you're in big trouble, because now they can now watch everything going back and forth. In fact, in my man-in-the-middle attack video, I don't think it's on my Network Plus, maybe it is, but on my Security Plus videos, I demonstrate this. I perform an ARP poison, and I show what happens when someone gets in the middle of this communication and they're able to change or view everything that's happening that you're sitting across the network. So how do you prevent that? Well, you use this dynamic ARP inspection. It's a capability that is built into your network switch. It works in conjunction with DHCP snooping, which is a way that your switch understands when somebody gets a DHCP response. It marks that. It keeps track of who's getting these IP addresses. That way, if somebody's trying to communicate with a fake ARP response from a different MAC address, it says, wait a second, you're not the person who originally got that DHCP address. How could you possibly be responding back on an ARP if you aren't the person who's that actual man, who's the actual in station? You're trying to be a man in the middle. I'm going to stop you now because I'm keeping track of these. I'm going to intercept that ARP request. I'm not going to send it to the in station because I'm doing this dynamic ARP inspection. I'm checking all of these ARPs as they go through. Only things that are valid are going to make it through, and that prevents any type of man-in-the-middle attack. Very common to see that happen. So if you answered for DAI, prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, you're one of those 40%. Got it absolutely right. We got a few minutes left. Let's get through another question, shall we? We should be able to get through one of these. And the question is, which of these authentication methods would be commonly used with WPA2? Which of these authentication methods would be commonly used with WPA2? Would it be EAP? Would it be CHAP? Would it be PEEP? Would it be Kerberos? Or would it be PAP? This is probably one of the funner questions to answer. If you think you know the answer, go to the website. So where would you go? Go somewhere. Go to Socrative.com, where you'll see it pop up in the Professor Messer room and be able to answer these. There it is, Socrative.com. How could I possibly know where this happens to be? And the room name, Professor Messer. No answering in the chat room, of course. And no Googling it. What are you doing? Stop it. Stop with the Googling. Which of these authentication methods would be commonly used with WPA2? This is one that you need to know the differences between WPA2 and the other wireless encryption types. That's one where it would be very useful to know these things. So I know there's just too many acronyms, isn't there? EAP, CHAP, PEEP, Kerberos, PAP. I told you, I warned you that there are tons of acronyms, probably more than any other exam is the networking. We love to do acronyms in networking and protocols. If you go to download Wireshark and just list out all the protocols they support, you'll be sitting there for days seeing things you've never seen before. What in the world is this thing? How can anyone know all of this? Well, the answer is no one person does know all of this. So don't be overwhelmed because there's a ton of things in here. People who are doing this in the real world every day have to now learn all of these things, and you're stopping and researching all the time before you move into these new projects. I used to install and implement tons of next generation firewalls, which had VPNs and data and HTTPS decryption capabilities that use these certificates, and it had a site-to-site VPN, and it had all of these different encryption mechanisms, and just a monstrous amount of data. And we were constantly going back and refreshing what we knew about how these functions work. So this is a very common example of doing this. Let's see how we did with this using these authentication methods with WPA2. Let's see, 42% said EAP, 19, 17, and 17. A tie for second is CHAP, PEEP, and Kerberos, and only 6% said PAP. These are things you will run into. EAP is absolutely the extensible authentication protocol. It is really not so much a protocol as a way to do authentication. It's a framework, and a lot of different devices and functions use EAP. A very common way to do this, obviously, is in WPA and WPA2. That's where we usually see EAP referenced. But other mechanisms can also use EAP because it is such a standardized framework at being able to work through these. So if you're somebody who answered EAP, the 44% of you that answered A got this one absolutely right. Well done with that. That's one of those, I think, that really does come in handy whenever you're working through these pieces. Well, that gets us through, can you believe, another hour of what we've done here on the study group. We do a Network Plus study group every month. The next one is going to be April 13, 2016. If you're watching this in the replay and you're way past April at this point, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar and be able to go through this. Coming up next, the main part of the show is over. If you have been watching this for continuing education credits, you can go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. Inside of that Contact Us link, put the March 2016 Network Plus Study Group, give me your name, and use the special code word EAP. And that EAP code word means you must have watched this. You must have sat through all of this entire study group, and I'll send you a digital certificate that says, yep, you get an hour. Nice job on that. There's more things coming up. I've got open phone lines coming up next. So if you are sticking around for the second hour, and I've also got my pet peeve for the month we're going to talk about as well, which is really not a pet peeve as much as something I think will be important for you to know when you're working on your networks as well. And if this is something where you've worked and joined us for this, I want to thank you so much for doing this as well. I love doing these study groups, and I couldn't do it without your participation. So I thank you for watching this, not only for attending live, but watching the replays as well. And with that, we'll see you in the second hour. If you have to leave us now, I can appreciate that as well. But we'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone. Whoa. Let's now shift gears a little bit. I should probably turn on the phone lines. Okay. And take a drink of something. Not really sure I was going to make it there at the beginning. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Let me get the phone lines open so you'd be able to call in. You may not want to call in first. I have something to go through first, something I thought we would just step through and have this here. I should probably start up my Skype on this. And you can tell I'm the only person who's working on this because there's nobody here screening calls. There's nobody setting up my phone lines. I'm just trying to make it all work here myself. So let's get these things going, shall we? I've got a lot to pour through in a very short period of time until my voice gives out anyway. Let's try to call in and get at least that piece of it set up. Is it going to say something? Well, you're welcome. Yes. So what do I type in? I type in a thing, and then I do a pound sign. Enter my thing there. And you notice I turn off the sound. Oh, I got it wrong.
That was an invalid
See?
for Professor Messer.
Yeah, I know.
Please re-enter.
I will. Okay. This is compelling video, by the way. I know. There we go. So, okay. Let's go back. I have some things to go through. My pet peeve of the week. It's not really pet peeve. I see this popping up from time to time, and I saw a post on Reddit this week where someone was struggling plugging in, and they had got a new facility. They weren't a network person. They had got a new facility. They were connecting devices together, and all of their devices were auto negotiating at 100 megabit per second, and none of them were auto negotiating at a gigabit per second, except he had brand new Cat 6 cable and very short runs. So obviously, the cable itself would be able to support a gig connection, but he wasn't getting a gig. He was only getting 100 megabit. And so the questions came up about, he said, well, we've got punch down blocks. I have no idea how a punch down block works. So he wasn't a network person, so I can appreciate that. The punch down blocks are weird. You look at him like, what is this thing? I don't understand what I'm looking at. But at least he was able to track back the wires. He says, I think some are wired, some runs are wired at 568A. My patch cables seem to be wired at 568B, and I'm putting one run with A and one run with B. Is that my problem? And obviously it's not. For those of you familiar with 568A and 568B, as long as you're going from pin 1 to pin 1 on a single run, and pin 2 to pin 2, and pin 3 to pin 3, these are straight through connections. So if you have straight through connections on one link and you have straight through connection on the other link, then it's straight through, right? You don't have a problem. You can combine A on one connections on one run, and B connections are B wiring on a completely different run, and you're fine, because at the end, if you look, pin 1 is still connected to pin 1, pin 2 is still connected to pin 2, pin 3 is still connected to pin 3, etc. Now, of course, what people will then say, and they said this in the subreddit, was the response was, it's okay because if you connect and wire one side is 568A and wire the other side is 568B, it's technically a crossover cable, and the machines today can use this auto MDIX capability to automatically use the crossover cable as a pass-through, so that's not your problem, which is absolutely incorrect. Many things about that were incorrect. Many things about that were correct. Like many things, some of that was right, some of it was wrong. So I thought it might be nice to go through this, what we have created with this idea of what a crossover cable is and what 568A and 568B are. First, if you were to get your hands on the EIA TIA 568 specification, at least not only until recently, and it really deals with more fiber connections, the word crossover isn't even in the specification. It's nowhere in there, because the 568 specification deals with how you configure and set up wiring in your infrastructure. It has nothing in there about topologies, at least not until recently. There's a fiber connection that was added recently as an addendum that has the word Ethernet in there. But for copper, nothing in there talks about Ethernet or token ring or any other kind of connections. It just doesn't say anything, because it's really describing how you build your wiring infrastructure. So there's no mention of crossover. There's no mention of Ethernet as it applies to 568A and 568B. So whenever you will see someone say, this is a crossover connection, what they're really describing is this. If you were to wire 568A on one side and 568B on the other side, you effectively get this. And it coincidentally, for 10 and 100 megabit Ethernet, this actually does have exactly the same wiring as an Ethernet crossover cable. Just happened to work that way. This is not how you would describe crossover, though. Taking A on one side and putting B on the other side doesn't mean that's a crossover cable. It coincidentally is wired the same way as a 10 and 100 megabit Ethernet crossover cable. There are obviously many kinds of crossover cables, and that is just one example of one kind of crossover cable that happens to be the same thing coincidentally as those two. Now, it used to be 100 megabit, 10, 100 megabit was all we had. So you will see on many websites, because I did a lot of research this week, many websites will say a crossover cable is when you have A on one side and B on the other side. No. A on one side and B on the other side is a mismatch. It happens to also be the same wiring for a 10, 100 megabit Ethernet crossover cable. And I'm making this distinction because if you were to put up on the screen also a gigabit crossover cable, notice that a Ethernet gigabit crossover cable is not the same thing as 568A on one side and 568B on the other side. This is the point I'm trying to get across, is that don't think of it as A on one side and B on the other side as a crossover cable. Crossover cable is a particular kind of wiring for 10100. It's a different kind of wiring for gigabit Ethernet. Why is that? Because with gigabit Ethernet, at least on the methods we use, which is the 1000 base T standard, that's really what we're all using. We use all 4 pairs of wires in the run. All 8 wires are in use. If we were to just put A on one side and B on the other side, notice that pins 4, 5, 7, and 8 are straight through. They don't cross over anything. But notice pins 4, 5, 7, and 8 on a gigabit crossover connection is very different. So if you were to put A on one side and B on the other side, it turns out it's a crossover cable. And they are correct. The auto MDIX functionality does kick in, and even though it's a crossover cable, the Ethernet adapter will change things around and use it like a straight through cable. But because it's wired this way, it will never negotiate to a gig connection, ever, because it's not wired as a gigabit crossover cable. It's not wired as a gigabit crossover cable or a gigabit straight through cable. It sees this and says, well, the best I can do here is 100 megabit. Let's auto negotiate at 100 megabit. How's that? That's assuming, of course, that the auto MDIX functionality is turned on. If auto MDIX is turned off, obviously it's not going to do that, but I think most devices do that by default these days. So that's why whenever I see this and people will constantly say A on one side and B on the other side is a crossover cable, it's not. It is coincidentally a type of very specific crossover cable for specific topology running at specific speeds. That's a big disclaimer. And you should not think of how you're wiring your physical network in terms of how a network topology operates. Because as time goes on and we implement something like gigabit Ethernet, all those things get thrown out the window. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. And that's my thing of the week of being able to work through this. So the phone lines are open. And of course, the chat room is open. If you are watching this live or we're watching this online, you can, of course, in the chat room, ask questions in there as well, being able to work through those pieces. I've also got phone lines available at 855-785-RJ45. If you're on Skype, absolutely free. No Skype minutes are required for this at +1 855-785-7545 anywhere in the world, and you'll be able to call in. So I've got those here. You don't have to call in. You can be in the chat room. I've been watching the chat room go by. Yes, folks have noticed when people were putting answers in the chat room, they suddenly disappeared, whether the answer was correct or not. Sometimes the people disappeared. I try not to do that. But you'll notice that some things as they go by are doing that. I'm wondering if the person, I haven't checked back with that Reddit response where the person was going through those problems they were having, if they finally got the response from those. No, gigabit doesn't use an AB standard. And Ethernet and the way you wire your network are 2 completely different things, and you should talk about them differently. Gigabit uses standard wiring, 8-pin wiring, as does 100 base T. The crossovers are different between 10100 gigabit or 10100 Ethernet and gigabit Ethernet. Has nothing to do with A and B. You shouldn't talk about it that way because obviously a T1 crossover cable has nothing to do with an A or a B or anything else. A crossover cable for another type of WAN connection that uses maybe ISDN. ISDN crossover, completely different for those and being able to work through those pieces. So make sure that you understand the difference between your physical network infrastructure and the topology that's running on top of the physical infrastructure. And if you have a way, you normally would have to pay to get your hands on the 568A or the 568 standard, the wiring standard for 568. But if you're really good at Googling, you can find one. So I'll just say that. And being able to see that that's there and being able to read through. It's interesting to read through some of these specifications at times. Let's see if I can get these calls going with the 954 area code. Must be a South Florida caller. Are you there? What's your name?
Yes, hi. My name is Matthew.
Hey, Matthew. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I have a quick question. I know when we're getting continuing education credits, now are we allowed to get those right before we take Network Plus, or you have to get the credits after you get the Network Plus?
CompTIA will not accept a continuing education unit that occurred prior to you receiving your certification. So you first have to get the cert.
Sure.
I've had people run through this because they've taken they've taken a class, and classes are a lot of CEU credits. And they took a class. It was all week long. They had tons of credits to apply. And at the end of the class, they went and they got their Network Plus. And then they tried to submit the class. They said they won't take it because you had to have your certification first. They looked at the dates, said, no, this happened before you got certified. That doesn't count. So you would have to get your certification first, and then you can start accumulating CEUs, not before that instance, unfortunately. Isn't that a bummer?
Yeah. All right, yeah, no problem. All right, thank you. I appreciate your answer.
Thanks.
Thank you for the good video. Keep it up.
I appreciate it, Matthew. Thanks for calling. There's
Take care.
the CEU process. I could probably do an entire video on continuing education units. Somebody write that down so I can remember it. I think that would be a good one to go through, and being able to work through those pieces. Because it is, there's a lot to read. It's not as hard as it really is on the website. But if you go through the website, it's hard to understand exactly what they're trying to tell you. But there's really only a certain number of things you can do to renew your certification. It'd be nice to break it down that way and have all of those pieces there, being able to work through them. Whenever I go through the CEUs, just very quickly, there's really two ways to renew your certification. And really one way. To renew your certification, you accumulate continuing education units. And you can do that by taking a different certification exam. You can take the same certification exam as long as it's a newer version. You can take other manufacturer certification exams. You can attend an event like this. You can go to a training class. You can teach a class. You can write a blog entry. There's a lot of things you can do to accumulate continuing education units. One thing that's about that is that you have to pay a certain amount every year to be able to accumulate these units. However, if you take a higher level CompTIA certification exam and pass it, that will renew all of your lower level certification exams, and there's no charge, no annual fee for that. There's obviously a fee to take the exam, but you don't have to pay the ongoing maintenance, the yearly maintenance costs if you're taking a CompTIA, higher level CompTIA exam. There's a ton of exams you can take. If you take it from a third party, you still have to pay your annual maintenance fee. So that's one of those things that's useful to know if you're trying to save money and you know you're going to take a higher level exam anyway. Just take your high level exam. You just renewed your older ones. It's kind of nice. CompTIA has a list of these on their website. Let's see if I can find the list. This is the challenge on the CompTIA website, is it's not exactly simple to find the things on their continuing education site. So let's go to, I don't know, continuing education. Let's just click on the main continuing education link. Renew your certification, learn more. Okay, how to renew in 4 easy steps. This is not 4 easy steps. Log in, agree to this, make your payment, and then complete activities. Okay, the hard part was really step 4, CompTIA. This is really what we need to know about. It's really one hard step to be able to do this. They say CE activities are here. You can click on it. Here are the CEUs required. There's a little link on the screen, a tiny little link. Download the CE program activities summary. I don't know why this doesn't have a bunch of arrows pointing to it. It should be in bold. It should have a graphic. There should be a dancing person next to it so that you will click on it and see all of the things that you could possibly do to renew your CompTIA certification. In fact, why is this not in an HTML format on their site already? Why is this popping up a PDF? And somebody on the website, John says, this is so confusing. John, you are absolutely correct. This is so confusing. They need to really lay it out. It's really not as confusing as it is online. It's a lot simpler. Do this and you're renewed. Why don't they just do that? Here's your step. No, it's your 4 easy steps. Renewal activities are things like earning a CompTIA certification, a non-CompTIA certification, teaching a course, creating instructional materials, completing a CompTIA exam development workshop, publishing a relevant industry article, white paper, blog post, or book, and you can see the others, a webinar, conference, training course. With some of these, by the way, you can only earn a certain number. So this, for instance, qualifies as attending a live webinar. You get 1 CEU per hour. If you're renewing a Network Plus, you can only get 6 of these. So you can watch 6 of my study groups, and I will give you 6 hours worth. But if you ask for more than that, I'll still give you the credits, but you can only use 6 of them in a 3-year period. So sorry about that. So that's one of the challenges, is that you have to find the right combination of CEUs to be able to do this. So see how 4 easy steps will get you to the point of doing continuing education units. I knew you would. It is a little bit of a challenge. It's one of those that does help. If the lower level, the renewal process and the levels are also on the website. So if you're wondering, does a Network Plus renew an A Plus? Does a Cloud Plus renew a Security Plus? You know, those are questions that they do have a list of these on the CompTIA website. And if you read through them and you start laying things out, you'll see how all of this works together for it to happen. You have to pass the higher level version of the exam to renew an older. It doesn't work the other way. You can't take your Network Plus and then go take the A Plus and have the A Plus renew the Network Plus, because the A Plus is considered a lower level exam. I don't know why. A Plus is hard. It's 2 exams, but they consider it a lower level exam, so you'd have to go the other direction, I guess, and being able to work through those. That is what I run into whenever I start working through all of these different pieces, trying to work through all of those and trying to make that happen. So I'm looking forward, by the way, to the emails I get about the 568A and 568B and how wrong I am. It's one of those things that we were talking in the chat room, I think yesterday, the day before, about. That's one of the things. It's not really a peeve, but it's something it's important, because people misunderstand the relationship between those two things. And in the case of this guy on Reddit, that could have been his whole problem, is that A on one side and B on the other side, it was working, but it only went up to 100 megabit. I think that's exactly what his problem was, actually. He didn't even have a cable tester, though. I mentioned there's cable testers out there. I should have put mine here. If I go to that big website that sells stuff, Amazon, go to professormesser.com/Amazon, and cable tester. You know, there's lots of cable testers here. Here's one that's $2.97 plus $5 shipping. That's probably the most basic you would ever want to get. That's a little frightening, actually, from a networking perspective. One that's a little more automated with more functionality, $78. Here's the ones that I think I have. Do I have a Klein or do I have a Fluke or something like that? It wasn't that expensive. Something like this that's $30. That's a toner probe. Here's a cable tester, $36. That's about what you would be paying, $20. And that's one that's going to do a wire map for you. That's really all it does. It's a Trip Lite. That's a good name. Network cable tester. It's probably a pretty decent box that has the functionality you want. It's got coax on it. It's got some RJ45. It'll do a wire map for you, which is the important part. It will tell you what's going to where. And $37.44. That's what we're talking about. Because he said, do I need to rent one of these things? No, you probably have Amazon Prime already. Just go get it and you'll have it in 2 days. And you should always have one. It's one that you just should always have available. It comes in handy. I ran into that problem here. I think I documented this on my Instagram. I was plugging in my gigabit connection and I was only getting 100 megabit. And I had just punched down these wires. In fact, here it is on my Instagram. There it is. And this is the problem I ran into, is all of these got punched down. In fact, this really was not a very good punch down. I didn't push the wires all the way in. And you can see the orange wires got pushed all the way in. The green one, and starting there on pin 3 all the way down to pin 8, they weren't pushed in all the way into the jack. But at least I got a connection. At least it made a connection probably down to pin 7. But notice pin 8, the copper is here. The little tines that are supposed to connect to the copper are just above it. So this was not making a connection. Probably pin 7 wasn't either, now that I'm looking at it. Neither of these were really connecting. So it negotiated at 100 megabit because it was able to get pins 1, 2, 3, and 6. So it was able to connect to those and give me 100 megabit, but did not come up at gigabit. That's another example of how you can really create a problem with this. And I was plugging in my network attached storage, so I needed gigabit speeds. And so I looked at it and go, no, this is me not punching things down properly, cut it off, did the whole thing again, and came up at gigabit speeds. But in the meantime, I documented so you could see how badly I did at crimping down a cable, and everyone needs to be able to see how bad I do that. I don't do it enough. I do it enough in the studio. The basics of what I'm doing are in here. And although there are a lot of screens and things that you're looking at, there's not so much change going on. I have a lot of equipment that's in the racks. I connect them all up, and then they're done. Nothing much changes. So I don't get as much punch down and crimping work as I probably should, even though I have a lot of punch downs and I have a lot of crimping in the studio and in my home. It becomes very useful. Do non-CompTIA certs renew lower level certs? They absolutely do. On the CompTIA website is a list of the courses or the certifications that renew other certifications. So let's see if I can find this. There is on the main website for CompTIA on how to renew your CompTIA certification. If you scroll down past the 4 easy steps, they say that you can renew with a higher level CompTIA certification, and then they say renew with other IT certifications. So on here, you had mentioned do non-CompTIA certs renew lower level. Let's assume you're meaning Network Plus. So I'm going to choose the Network Plus link on here, and you can renew Network Plus, which requires 30 CEUs with these certifications. Some from Aruba, Brocade, Checkpoint, Cisco, CompTIA, CWNP, eCouncil, EMC, Encase, GIAC, HP, IBM, ISACA. I think you were talking about the CISSP or Associate. Was that the one you were mentioning? Yes, it was. So 30, that would renew your Network Plus. Juniper, LPI, Microsoft, all the Microsoft certs, Novell, Oracle, Red Hat, SCP. There's a lot there. Now, you still have to pay your annual maintenance fees for the 3 years, but you get your 30 points and you're renewed. Done. Finished. In fact, for Network Plus, what is the cost for Network Plus for the annual renewal? Make your renewal payment. Let's look at the annual CE fees, which require me clicking another link. At least it's not in PDF format. So the annual fee is $50. So over a 3-year period, it's $150, which is cheaper than taking a CompTIA certification. So that would be something there you could go through. As I mentioned, it's just many twists and turns to be able to get back to the renewal stuff. It can be a bit of a challenge to get there and work through those pieces. So don't worry so much on those and going there and working through them. Didn't really do that. Did I talk about load balancing? I did not talk about load balancing this month. Was I supposed to talk about load balancing this month? I'd be glad to. If you have a specific question about it, that may be something worth asking. And as far as network load balancing, that is a whole barrel of monkeys, and being able to work through it. I implemented, some folks are saying, it might just be easier just to retake the exam. Maybe. If you do plan on retaking the exam, it has to be the newer exam version. You cannot take the same exam number that you've already passed. They don't allow that. So you have to take a newer version of the exam. So you might have to wait until that exam is released. And if you waited until the end of one, there might be a short ramp there. So just another thing to consider. It's never as easy as you think, isn't it? As far as load balancing on networks are concerned, there's a lot I do with load balancing for if you're going to the Professor Messer website right now, you went through a load balancer to grab this data. In fact, you went through a reverse proxy, which then went to a load balancer, which then went to one of a number of web servers to provide you with this information that you finally see in your browser. So load balancer has become incredibly useful to be able to maintain uptime and availability. I can take down one of those servers, do work on it. In the meantime, the website's still running. Things are still happening. I can bring that back up and then reverse the process on the other. And still there is always going to be uptime and availability. So it's an important part of this. I used to work with some very large companies that had on their load balancer, I think 10 or 12 web servers. And this was back in the day, as they say, where there were where Microsoft's IIS, their Internet Information Server, was a very popular way to provide web services. Probably not the best choice for this company, but you go with what you got. This is what they developed on, and sometimes the people doing the network aren't really the ones that get to decide the operating systems that are in use. Well, for those of you that go back to the day with IIS, it was not the most stable platform. These days, Microsoft's web servers are remarkably stable. They work very, very well. But back then, they didn't really so much. And what they found is there was a memory leak, and after a certain amount of time, the web server would simply crash, would fail. And obviously, you had lots of other servers there, but they tended to crash very quickly. Bring them all up at the same time. The memory leak was one, and because they were in the load balancer, they were getting basically the same load and the same load. So of course, the memory leak all hit at about the same time. So all of them would fail at about the same time. And for Internet Information Service, you had to restart the machine to get rid of this memory leak problem. You could just restart the service. It had to really reboot the OS for the best possible scenario. So what they did is they had 12 servers. It was 12 servers. These 12 servers they put on a timer. And in conjunction with their load balancer, they didn't have the load balancer tell them about this. And every 2 hours, I think it was, they would have a machine reboot itself. So each machine had its own schedule. You're the 12 o'clock hour. You're the 2 o'clock hour. So you see what they did. And every 2 hours or every hour, it might have been, they would just go around each machine at the top of the hour would reboot itself. So by the time the entire day went around, you would reboot it yourself once or twice, whatever it happened to be. And I thought that was an ingenious way to do it because they had a load balancer in the front of this. The load balancer knew immediately if the server wasn't available because it's checking every server every second or so. Every second it knows if the server is responding. If a server doesn't respond, it doesn't go back to that server. It counts it as being off, and it keeps checking in with it until it finally responds again. It was brilliant. It was really a great way to handle the problem, something that's a very non-technical fix, really. But they were able to do it because there was a load balancer that was always providing access to the services for all of the other machines that were there. I don't know if they still do it that way. They probably don't because you don't have that problem anymore. But what a great way to handle a load balancing issue. Take the load balancing and handle a web server problem, a bug in a web server software. They fixed it really with a network appliance, with a load balancer, being able to work with it that way. Really, I've seen the most amazing things in my life, in my world. We talked earlier, in fact, a story that came to mind, and I think I've mentioned this on an earlier study group, but it's one that came to mind because we were talking about man traps. And I was working in Scotland with a bank, and they were doing a lot of work in their data center. And this was a smaller room. They had done a ton of construction. It was really under construction. There was plastic around the walls, and it was clearly in the process of being built. They had just installed a new man trap. We went into the data center, did what we needed to do, rebooted, got things up and running. We were putting in some network management systems and some network analysis tools. We installed those, confirmed they were working. We're ready to leave. We go to the man trap to go out, and it didn't respond. It was one where it was a small tube. You walk into the tube, it rotates around and lets you out the other side. And we stepped in, we badged, nothing happened. Okay, a literal man trap. We could walk outside of the man trap. We could take a step back because it wasn't rotating through and allowing us through. But now we're stuck in the room. We couldn't go anywhere. Now, in this particular data center, there was no offices. There was security. There was a phone in the room. We called security. And they couldn't get the door to work either. The man trap door wasn't working. There was nothing in that door that would allow us through. There was no way to turn it off. There was no way to bypass it. And then we hear in the back of the room, they had gotten a box cutter, and some of the walls weren't completed. They were just plastic. They just cut the plastic, opened the plastic up. And we just walked through the plastic. And I said, why didn't we do that? Why? I could have done that. I didn't need security. I didn't need a man trap for that point. Obviously, you couldn't do that. You really did need security to do that. But they opened up the the plastic allowed us through. So that was my man trap experience. That was a literal man trap. I was not able to get out of there. I was very glad the room wasn't done yet so that I could sneak out through that connection. So there's my man trap story of working through those pieces and having those go through. I know it's just one of those things. And I will tell you, at this data center for this organization was one of the most amazing data centers I'd ever seen. One of the cleanest, one of the most modern, one of the most, from an infrastructure perspective, it was pristine. Every cable was exactly where it was supposed to be. Everything was well lit. Everything was perfectly cooled. It was remarkable. This was obviously something that doesn't happen there, rarely happens there. And it was part of the construction process that really caused the problem. But it was a lot of fun trying to get out of that room. And I've got a story now of my time in Scotland where I was barely hanging on because of the time change at that point. And of course, we had to go in at 1 a.m. Scotland time, which is, I'm now messed up because that's early in the morning for me, except we've been up all night. That's a real challenge to go through. I guess it was the middle of the night for me and early morning for them for those pieces. Who knows at that point? You're just trying to hang on and get things running. Going through the Network Plus questions, let's go see what you asked me this week and see what you were asking about. I've got a list of the questions you sent me. Give me a moment. I'll pull these up on my screen and having those go through. For those of you that have been in big data centers before, you know exactly what I'm talking about with the wiring and the infrastructure and the security. A number of companies that you work with, in fact, will go to a third-party data center that a lot of organizations are in. So there's these literal cages set up. I have pictures in my A+, I think I put one in there, of a cage system where it is just a bunch of wire that is keeping you out. It's a big fence, fenced wire that's keeping you one person out of another person's stuff. There's locked doors and they allow you in, and you have certain racks that are behind a chain link fence. It's a very common way to do it. In fact, when I start working through those environments, it's actually pretty nice because you've got a finite area to work in. They're feeding you everything through the top, and now you've got all of your systems right there in one single place to be able to work through those. It becomes a very easy way to work and have those available. I like having environments like that too, because it becomes very, very useful to manage people coming in and out. When it's a corporate data center, you have to have very strong processes in place, and unfortunately, not everybody does that. They don't necessarily follow those processes very well. When it's a third party and they are required to be very secure with everyone's systems, it becomes a very different story. They become very, very particular about who's coming in, who's coming out. They take your license information. You're given a badge. You only get your license back when you had the badge back in. Very nice way to do it, really. I like being in those environments. Sometimes it's a little bit of a problem when you run into an issue that you need to have solved today, and they won't allow you to do that because there are processes and procedures. But that's the game you play. That's the way it works. Let's go through some of these questions that you have provided to me. I probably need to zoom up my screen a bit so I'm able to see it. Being able to work through those pieces. On the list of different things, go through these pieces. Somebody did ask about broadcast domains. I'm going to hold that one back until next week because I have a question we weren't able to get to specifically on broadcast domains. So for those of you studying for next week, that's a topic you may want to look at and how those are associated with this. One question came in about VPNs. I obviously have done tons of work with VPNs, both end-user VPNs and site-to-site VPNs. This question was really about how can you use a VPN to make a server accessible remotely? And it's really a pretty simple process to be able to use a VPN. I've noticed there's a number of third parties these days, a lot of third-party companies providing VPN services, and they seem to all be based around keeping yourself anonymous or making yourself appear as if you are in a different country. For instance, if you wanted in the United States to watch the BBC programming, they've said we aren't going to allow that from outside the country. And some people get around that. They circumvent that method by connecting to a VPN in another country in the UK and then watching it that way. Probably violates the terms of an agreement, terms of service to use that. But there are businesses that are based around these people misusing the end user licensing agreements in terms of services. That's just a good example of that. There is usually a number of ways you do this. There could be a third party making the VPN server. You need a server for the VPN. There's probably a third party server you might be connecting to. If you want to be really secure, this would be a server you have yourself. So you're in control of the endpoint. You're in control of what is decrypted and what happens to the data once it decrypts. Very useful to have that functionality. A lot of the VPN servers are available now also on the routers that you get for home. So a small office, home office router, the higher end ones might also have a VPN functionality associated with it. And it usually requires that you load a piece of software on your workstation and you simply use a username and password and connect to it. So everything in between your device and your router at home is now an encrypted tunnel. Makes it very useful to have that there. That's a very easy way to set up and have you can access servers and printers and connect to all the devices at home as if you're sitting in your house rather than you sitting somewhere else like the coffee shop or something like that. Do you need to know the cable/IEEE standards by heart? Do you need to know? In fact, they give an example of things like 10 base 2. And I can't express more how important it is to grab the CompTIA Network Plus certification exam objectives. I know I say this every month, but people ask this every month. You need to know everything that's in this list. You'll notice it has a different look and feel than you may remember. They've recently changed the format of this. It's exactly the same content. It's exactly the same words. It's exactly the same objectives. Don't worry about that piece. But the layout is very different. You can see the differences in the layout on the screen. So you need to go through and list out all of these different things to understand it. Now, you specifically were talking about cables. And so you do need to know certain kinds of cables and different types of Ethernet setups. Let's see if we can find the Ethernet pieces that are here. Let's see if I can find it. This may be a bit more of a challenge. Why don't I just look for 100 base? There we go. Ethernet standards. So you're asking, do I need to know 10 base 2? That was the question. One of the things that was asked in the question. Here are all of the Ethernet standards you need to know. That's what's in the exam objectives. You don't need to know anything that goes beyond this list. Focus on what's on this list. If you looked at my videos, well, 10 base 2 is there. So you need to know everything that's in these lists of things. If you're wondering, do I need to know different kind of the 100 gigabit speeds? There's a lot of 40 gigabit and 100 gigabit standards that are out there. Do I need to know those? Well, if I look at the Ethernet standards, nope, they're not on the list. So don't learn them. That's one of the things you always have to remember about CompTIA is they stay very, very close to this list of exam objectives. They don't go beyond this list. Now, they will tell you at the top. Somebody always mentions this, so I'm going to scroll all the way to the top of this. They tell you that the lists of examples provided in bulleted format are not exhaustive lists, and they might ask you anything. I really think that just gives them some wiggle room. Because what I have found is that if you know everything on this exam objective list, you're going to pass your exam. It's really that simple. If you know everything, that's a lot to know, but if you know everything that's on the list, you're going to pass your exam. One of the things they also tend to do, and I don't think it's listed in here, they have listed it elsewhere, is on some of their exams, at some times, they might ask you a question that's not on the exam objectives, and that question may not be one that they grade. They will often ask things about emerging technologies that you probably shouldn't know about, but for some reason they ask you these questions. I find that to be a little off-putting when you're trying to take a certification exam. I hate that they do that, but you may run across those when you take your exam. So don't look at when you come across one of those questions, don't worry about it too much. Just answer it, keep it going. Don't let it throw you with those pieces. and being able to work through those. It's in the exam objectives. They'll explain that to you. You'll see what's there and you'll have the exact view. So make sure you understand exactly what's in this list. Use this as a checklist. Go through this entire piece. If you need to print it out so you can cross things out, I use my particular PDF viewer allows me to highlight and make changes and annotate. I do that electronically. That way I can take it with me everywhere or keep it on a Google Drive or a Dropbox and reference it from wherever I happen to be. Very useful to have that there. So make sure you know how to get to these. An easy way to get to the objectives, you can go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives. I always have a link there that takes you to the CompTIA exam objectives. So that's another way to go about doing that. Make sure you take advantage of those because that's the ultimate list. People ask, what do I need to know on the exam? That's what you need to know. That's what I always tell them. Get the exam objectives. We'll tell you exactly what you should be expecting on the exam and what should be there. That's another good way to go about doing that, I think. Let's go through another question folks have sent in. A lot of folks ask about subnetting questions, and I think it would be good to do some subnetting questions. It's difficult to do during a study group. I have asked questions before. We did one today about Class C. I've asked questions also about CIDR block notation. We've done some binary calculations on the study groups. That's another good one. But that's not one I tend to do on the study groups for a couple of reasons. One, it's a little bit difficult to do in the short time frame that we have. And secondly, if you look through the list of items that's in the exam objectives, subnetting is one bullet in one section of one domain of all of the domains on the exam. You might get a subnetting question. You might get 2 subnetting questions. You might get 0 subnetting questions, depending on what the pool happens to be. And that's why I tell people subnetting can be conceptually hard to wrap your head around, to try to figure out what are we trying to do here. It is not the easiest concept. It's one where you get the answer, you kind of figure it out, and then you're like, oh, that's how it works. But it takes you sometimes a long time to get to that point. It only took me years to figure it out. So that's one of the challenges I have with subnetting is it's a little bit difficult. If you go past the Network Plus, if you go into Cisco type exams, you need to be able to answer a subnetting question in about 10 seconds. You just don't have a lot of time on those exams, and you have a lot of subnetting that's going to be hitting you. So you need to be able to have a system in place, and I did mine by building a table before the exam started so that you can answer these questions of what is the broadcast address, what is the subnet address, what is the broadcast address, and what are the valid hosts within that subnet. Those are your main questions. If you can do that, you're good. What is the subnet network address? What is the subnet's broadcast address? And what are the valid hosts inside of that subnet? If you can do that, you're good. You can answer any subnetting question that's out there. And there is quite a number of challenges associated with obviously learning how to do that quickly. It's one where you have to really study a lot and become almost a rote process of doing it over and over and over and over again. But don't be dismayed if you're not getting it straight away. We rarely do. And I will tell you, as somebody who has visited many, many organizations, many network people, many security people, we will start mapping things out and drawing the diagram of their network. And because we're trying to figure out where we're going to put the firewall, what subnets that going to connect to. Is this a trunk connection? What VPNs or what VLANs are inside that trunk connection? What is the subnet for those? Oh, it's this subnet is a 10.1.1.0/30/26/27. It's not always a 24. It's not always a 16. Okay, so what is the IP address we're going to assign as the routing IP address for that VLAN? And now we have to think, okay, what are the valid IP addresses for that VLAN? We all have to take a step back and calculate, all right, what is okay? It's okay, this one, we can use that IP address. Well, not all of us are getting it. In the professional world with networking people, we still have to stop and think about it. And even then, is that really right? Let's plug it into the subnet calculator just to make sure I didn't mess that one up. And sometimes we do. We get it completely wrong. Oh, that's in the wrong subnet. Let's move it over here. It's just so common to make that happen. If you're on a certification exam, though, you don't have that time, you don't have a subnet calculator, you have to do it all yourself. So it might be worthwhile to watch other videos. I have a plan to actually put together videos, like a 5-video series on subnetting, and I really need to get back to that and do that so that you can see how I do it, because you need to be able to answer those in 10 seconds and keep it going. 10 seconds, keep it going. That should be 5 seconds should be what you're doing. 10 seconds max on those Cisco exams. Pretty important. Let's go back real quick, check a few things. Hello, chat room. I know I don't like subnetting either, but it's a nature of the beast. You have to be able to subnet. And fortunately, it's not hard math. And if you've created a table already, it's simple multiplication, simple addition. And once you've built the table, you're literally using 2 fingers. Start here, go to here, there's the answer. There's some great tables out there that can help you with that. And I really need to document mine, because they give you time before the exam to write things down on that horrible little flimsy laminated sheet of paper that they give you. And that's why I always bring my own pen. I always bring my own erasable marker that has a fine tip on it, because they give you, for some reason, like a marker that's for a whiteboard. It's got a big fat tip, and you can't possibly write. What are they thinking? Writing on this little tiny 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with this big fat marker. So I always bring mine and ask if I can use it. Of course, they say that's fine. And that's what I do. I write very, very specific lists. I write it all out. The entire format is there, and I can start the exam. That also lets the adrenaline get out of my system, because you're nervous and you're sitting down for the exam. It's very calming. It's zen. It's my moment of zen as I go through and build my IP addressing table. There's not really IPv6 subnetting you have to worry so much about, because we're basically doing a /64. I realize if you're an ISP, you're doing a lot of /48s to 64s, but it's not the same thing. IPv6 subnetting is not the same thing as IPv4. That's a completely different thing, and it's so much easier in IPv6 to do that. See, somebody did take their own markers, Network Plus. Now, Johnny, my question is, did that help? Did they have the big fat markers that were worthless, and you were happy you brought your own markers? Because that's really the key, I think, is having your own dry erase marker. That's the true determination of somebody who needs to take an exam and write down their subnetting table, because nobody else is writing that down. They're just trying to figure it out as they go and make that happen. We didn't talk a lot about the OSI model this month. Somebody did mention and send in a question about that. There's a lot of time that could be spent on the OSI model. For the Network Plus exam, you don't have to know a lot about the OSI model. I was chastised recently because my OSI video on my explanation of the OSI model and using the OSI model in the real world is about 10 minutes long total. And the criticism was, you can't possibly know everything about the OSI model in 10 minutes. That's right. You can't possibly know everything about the OSI model in 10 minutes, but you don't have to know everything about the OSI model for the Network Plus exam. I create videos that are going to tell you exactly what you need to know for the exam, and they really don't go outside the scope of that too much. On these kinds of events, we can talk a little bit more about it. We can talk about how it's applied in the real world. We can talk about a little bit out of scope of those types of things. And at the end of it, my Network Plus videos, it's so many hours. You don't want me droning on about these things, because then it would be twice as long that you would have to watch to get all of this in. It's bad enough you're already setting it up to 2x just to get through the 10 minutes in a 5-minute period. There's no reason you have to do all of that. Oh, yes, that's the other problem. Johnny's right, is that you'll go to a facility and they'll have the markers and they barely work. So that's really the best thing, is that you can bring your own markers with that and work those pieces. I'll try to get more OSI on the next list of things that we go through. I think that would be useful to be able to go through and talk a little bit more, maybe ask more questions about the OSI model anyway. Let's go to the 937 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Oh, hi, my name's Garrett.
Hey, Garrett, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Oh, I just had a quick question.
Hit me.
I took some Cisco training courses to get my CCNA.
Nice.
Now I know to get the CCENT and the CCNA, it's probably best that you have some hands-on experiences with using their equipment. And I went to a school called New Horizons, and I think they're a part of that Cisco Academy.
I bet they
Is there
are.
something I can, like, buy something like to get the experience that I need before I take the exam. I know the routers and switches are pretty expensive, so it'd be impractical. But is there like some labs or something that I can purchase?
You, sir, are absolutely correct that for both the CCENT, which is the entry-level network technician exam that you can take from Cisco, and the associated CCNA exam, you need to know Cisco CLI, the command line interface, hands-on, and being able to troubleshoot hands-on as well. You need to be able to set up a network, examine the network, understand where the problems are on the network, and be able to fix them all at the command line. And this applies to both the CCENT and the CCNA. It used to be the CCENT didn't have a lot of hands-on. It has a ton of hands-on it now. This latest version that's been out a couple of years. So you're absolutely right. You have to have that before you walk into these exams. If you're watching this on a replay or somebody else considering the Cisco exams, you have to know this hands-on. You're not going to pass unless you have hands-on, bottom line. So the real problem and the real challenge comes from getting your hands on. So you're right. You could get your own switches and routers and systems and set it up. There's a number of places you can go online, on eBay. There are cottage industries that people run out of their house that do nothing but sell and resell these Cisco certification packs. But these are $300, $400, $500 just to get this set of switches, and you really can't use it for anything else but certification, because they're older switches, they're older routers. You would never put these in production, but they're great for certification, which is why they cost, relatively speaking, cost so little. But still, $300, $400, $500, that's a big investment for something that ultimately you're not going to need anymore. So you're going to have to resell it yourself, I guess, eventually. There are some other ways to do this. And if the place that you got your training is a Cisco Academy partner, go back to them and ask them for a copy of Cisco's networking application. I'm going to pull up the details of the emulator. What Cisco provides is an emulator function to be able to use this. The network piece it's useful to be able to work this way. I think running a virtual environment that Cisco has works perfectly for certifications, but it does have some limitations in being able to work through those pieces. There are some third parties as well that provide emulators. A good example, Boson is one that I have used in the past, where they are just going to give it to you straight up. Here's a fully complete emulated environment with built-in labs. So that's one thing. That costs money too. It's hundreds of dollars, $100 at least for that, as I recall. There is a open source / commercial. There's a cost that is kind of associated with it online called GNS3. GNS3 has a very powerful front end that allows you to do a lot of things. It is a little more than an emulator because it's using actual Cisco iOS software to run. So it's a little bit like the other systems that you could get from Cisco and other third parties, but it is one that really does provide you with an actual experience because it's really running Cisco's iOS. But there's the problem, of course, is that Cisco's iOS is one that you'd have to be able to run GNS3. So you have to be licensed to use the iOS to begin with. Well, if I'm licensed to use the iOS, I probably already have a switch or a router. So that's a little bit of a challenge too, to be able to do that. So that may or may not be the right solution. What I think a lot of people have found is that they're using GNS, but what I see is that people are using GNS and they're acquiring the iOS code in a violation of the copyright. So that's probably not ethically the best way to go about doing this. Cisco, if the place you went is a Cisco partner, they're one of Cisco's network academies, then they can provide you with a copy of Packet Tracer. In fact, you are licensed. If they were really a Network Academy partner, you are now licensed to use Cisco's Packet Tracer application. And Packet Tracer, pretty nice to be able to use. It helps that it's one that's available for to run as a Network Academy member. And there's tons of labs out there that you can get to go along with Packet Tracer. But you can only legally run Packet Tracer if you are a Networking Academy member. And that's somebody who has attended a course by a certified Cisco Network Academy provider. And you can be somebody who's either in the course or has previously been in a course. Their terms of use for this software are very broad. I think that's your best bet, is the Network Academy, because there's so many labs out there for it. It's a very powerful piece of emulation software, and it's one that comes directly from Cisco, so you know it's going to have the things in there that you're going to need to use. The second best choice, I think, would be a third party like Boson. I've used their emulator before, and it works very well. They've got one for Mac, they've got one for Windows, and it has labs along with it, and it works very well for the CCNA and the CCENT. And the third might be GNS3. The problem there is you're going to have the iOS software to be able to work it. But those are probably your three best choices. And your fourth choice, of course, is to get actual hardware. So really, there's four good choices there you can use to get those. All of them have advantages and disadvantages associated with them. It's disappointing that Cisco doesn't make Packet Tracer available to everybody, but I understand that they want people to attend their training classes, which is why they do it. I'm not sure that the place you went for your training is a Cisco Networking Academy partner, so it's worth asking them if they are and find out more about that, because I think that would be an excellent choice for doing anything, not just with the CCNT, CCNA, but Packet Tracer is good to use for your other Cisco exams as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'd say they are acquainted. They are a
Great.
partner with them.
Perfect.
The other question is the certified ethical hacker. I'm going for that too. So I don't know if there were labs I could use or websites I can go to prepare for that exam also.
No, I don't spend a lot of time looking at what goes on over at the EC Council. I think the content that's on the certified ethical hacker exam is very good content to know. But I have not been impressed with their organization in the past. I've said this on other study groups as well, is that the EC Council has had a number of very public breaches, security breaches. The last one, I think, was that they had kept Edward Snowden's passport when he applied for an EC Council certification, and they had it still stored electronically, even though he had already taken his exam and been done with this years ago. And the hackers got into the EC Council website, obtained that, and then posted it publicly. Now, at this point, he was already out of the country, so that wasn't the biggest problem for him. But obviously, they had access to everybody else's content and information as well. And they've had numerous problems with that. And it wasn't necessarily that the breach occurred that was the problem. It was their response to the breach that was probably more troublesome. And I, at that point, kind of discounted them as a someone who was serious about this kind of world. I guess maybe I might be giving them, I might be putting more on them than what was really there. I don't know anybody at EC Council. I've never spoken to anybody at EC Council. I only know what I see from their website and what I saw on the news. I only saw by the way they handled things, but that was enough for me. So I do like, if you look at the exam objectives for the Certified Ethical Hacker certification, I like the exam objectives. I like the things that you learn in there. I think it has kind of a dumb name, Certified Ethical Hacker. You're not really learning how to be an ethical hacker, or there's no such thing as a certified ethical hacker to begin with. You're learning about security and the way that people take advantage of vulnerabilities in operating systems and hardware, and you understand how to stop those. And in some cases, understand what they're doing to make some of these things happen. I think it's a little bit overhyped. I think they use the term hacking as a way to get more eyeballs. It's not. You're not. It's more marketing than anything, and I think we all know that. I've just not been impressed with them as an organization. So I haven't spent a lot of time looking at their stuff because I don't want to, which is kind of a bad thing for me to do, but that's what I do. It's just sort of, I have a bad taste in my mouth, so I just haven't spent a lot of time looking at their content. I like their exam objectives, but I could not point you in any way towards labs or content or anything else, nor would I, quite honestly.
I see.
I know that was
Okay.
that was a very harsh thing and very pointed. That's just my personal feelings about that particular organization certification. And as I mentioned, like anything else, I could be completely wrong. So if anybody thinks I am, you're more than welcome to tell me so. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's just my new project since I already obtained my A+ Network Plus and Security Plus. So
Just make sure you give them information that you know is going to be safe afterwards, and learn the information that's in their exam objectives. I like the content that you would learn in that class. I would love to be in a class like that. I think it'd be fun. I think you're learning a lot of really good things. Just make sure your information is safe.
will do.
Well, great. Thanks for calling.
Yes, thank you.
It was kind of a bummer I threw down there. Sorry, a little bit too much shade. Sorry about that. I was a little bit harsh towards CEH, but it does come up a lot. People ask a lot about that, and I just have a nervousness towards an organization that plays that fast and loose with people's information. I'm very particular about the information you put on my website. I'm very particular about how it's stored. I'm very particular about how it's protected. I don't put it on third-party locations. It is all locked down. I don't store any credit card information on my site. It's all handled between you and a third party. Every single bit of it's encrypted. I handle the encryption piece of it. I have a very particular way I like to handle those kinds of things. I would like for other people to handle it the same way. That's where I'm coming from with that piece. Well, as you can hear, it's kind of a bummer to end the study group on, isn't it? Not really where I was shooting for, but that's kind of how it worked out. But that comes to the end of probably 2 solid hours, and you can tell by what my voice is doing for the study group. This kind of ends what we're doing. If you are online and you are watching this, I'm going to do some tests with the audio once we're done here. So I will be here making noises into the microphone, but not necessarily paying much attention to what's going on. But you're more than welcome to talk in the chat room as we do that. But this would probably be a good place to kind of end the study group and finish things up for this particular month. We, of course, are doing one of these next month, so feel free to join me on the one that we're having next month on April the 13th. That'll be a good time to get back together now that spring is starting to come into the view. So join us again on Wednesday. If you do follow us for these study groups, I have a Security Plus study group next week, next Wednesday, same time, and we'll do this with the Security Plus side of things. You're welcome to join me for that too. And I'll probably be doing some testing of the audio after this. But if you're leaving us now, I want to thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everyone. Let's see if I can make audio work better or worse, shall we? Kind of show you what I'm doing here. I wonder if I can show you what I'm doing here. I bet I can. Let's see if I can do this. We're now going to play around. There's no other viable content from this point on. If you're watching the replay or you're watching live and wondering, will I get something out of what's about to happen? I would bet no. But you're going to follow along with me anyway to get this here. All right. Of course, my video hub is not responding on my Ethernet network. So what I'm going to do is this screen will disappear for a moment, and then it will come back relatively quickly. This should take less than a minute for things to go away. And what I'm really restarting is a video hub. In fact, I can show you me restarting this video hub. I've got a lot of different devices connected. This is one particular power distribution unit. It's an APC unit that's on my network, and I can control the different outlets from my desk. So I've got other things. Got printers hooked up. I've got Cisco switches, my Axia, my TriCaster, left speaker. I'm going to disable the video hub, which will effectively get rid of all the video going through. Is it going to get rid of the audio? I don't think so. You'll still be able to hear me. So I'm going to turn off immediately that video hub adapter, send that off on its way. So you're probably still able to hear me. I can't see that you're hearing me because I just turned off the view that I normally have to my TriCaster, but I'm going to turn back on the video hub. And I'm doing this because I'm trying to access the video hub with a piece of software and it's not responding to me. See, we're back. See what happens there? So I have running this software, and there it is. So this is the video switcher that I use. It's from Blackmagic. It's called the Blackmagic Micro Video Hub, and I have plugged in all of my inputs and outputs into this effectively a video matrix switch, and then I can decide what piece of video goes to what output. So I've got inputs coming into my TriCaster that's coming from, I have different cameras. The head cam is the one you see me talking to. The bird cam is the one that's here. It's the little birdie that's up there. That's there. So it's going to a different input that's on my TriCaster. I want to show you what I see on my TriCaster. So I'm going to take, I only have 4 inputs on my particular TriCaster. I'm not using my laptop anymore. So let's take the TriCaster control and put it over there. So what I normally see when I'm working on the study group is this screen. So this is the controls for the TriCaster. It is what's showing me what is happening when. I'm able to switch between the video inputs. You can even see at the top of the screen, I can probably put a mouse over there if I was to work. You can see along the top left up there is the video inputs. There's a graphic input. There's a lot of inputs I'm not using that are going across the network, that go across different buffers. You can see there's a lot of controls. A lot of the controls here that you see on the screen are also the ones that you see here. So it's the same. It's effectively this layout that's on my control panel that sits in front of me that's also available on this screen. You can see all the colored buttons. They're sort of colored. You see the blue, the orange, the red, and the green. It's the same blue and orange. You can kind of even see the colors here. It's hard to see, but there's the green, the red, the blue, the orange. They're also on here. So it matches up perfectly. If I didn't have this big control in front of me, I could easily just click on the screen with a mouse and it would work. So there's a little basic for the TriCaster front end. Now you can also see on the screen, I need to turn on the Synergy that I use. It's a software application that allows me to move the mouse that's normally in front of me on this screen, and it moves over onto my TriCaster control screen. So now you can see the mouse that's moving around that's in the middle of the screen right now. So I usually will work with this view in my graphics mode. You can see I've got a stock graphics slide up. That's the slide that comes up whenever I start and end the study group. It's the same as the slides that I just grabbed one from the screen I'm working on. But I'm working on this audio mixer, and one of the things you'll notice is that whenever I'm talking, you can see the audio here. This is the main audio input, and I've got different audios that are applied towards what I'm recording, what's going out on the stream, what's going out to different auxiliaries, because I have different ways to record these pieces. There's a lot of different moving parts behind the scenes and different pieces that I'm plugging into. Some of the audio is also carried out through the matrix switch. So I'm outputting some of this to a master output that's then going back to the matrix switch that's then being sent down to the recorder that I have here at the bottom of my screen, and being able to work with it. And you can see the recording's actually getting low. I'm getting a low space. You can see the flashing red lights now. It's warning me, but that's okay, because now at this point I don't mind if we lose any of the recording. We're good. It'll stop, and I don't lose anything. It just stops whenever it fills up. On these pieces, it is this recording and the stream. This stream volume that's here is what you hear. So I guess the real question is, are you hearing it okay? Is it too soft or is it too loud? So I'm going to bring up my view of the live screen. Now that I've been talking for a while, I'm going to put it to about where the audio is, or it has been in the past. The reason this changed is I upgraded my switching software, and it of course erased all my previous settings. Where the audio is, see, normally it's a little bit louder. The reason this changed just a little bit. So I think what I want to do is to increase the stream audio. But what I'm right now, the stream audio, it's a single stereo fader, and it's currently at about 9 decibels. And you can see I'm hitting the red a little bit. This is not the same as a VU meter that's analog, where you never want to go into red. It's a digital meter. It works a little bit differently. Going into red is okay, but it's giving you a warning that you could be clipping and hitting the top of something. So I want to go another dB up, another 3 dB higher. But it's very hard to do this with the mouse and the way I've got this going. There's probably a way to do it on the screen that's in front of me. I am just not sure how to specify another 3 dB. You just can't type it in, which drives me crazy. You have to use the mouse. So I'm going to turn off my audio, and then I'm going to adjust it because I don't want you to hear anything while I do this in case I spike it way up and then your ears will blow out. So let's try going up to about 12 dB so you can watch me struggle as I do this on the stream side. I'm going to no audio for a moment. We'll go to 12 and then I'll turn the audio back on. So there's 12.4. So that's 12.4 dB. It's a little bit higher. I'm still not clipping. You can still see a little bit of red there. I should be a little bit louder in your ears, but not much. And let's try the audio here. Let's go back to my live page and have a look at this and see how this sounds. Let's start up the live stream and listen into it. See how this sounds. See if it's any good. I'd like to know. Is it turned on? Oh, yeah, it's turned on. Where's the audio? Am I not getting? Oh, I didn't turn the audio on. Here we go. See if it's any good. I'd like to know. That's a little bit better. That's actually closer to where it was originally. Yeah, it's turned on. Where's the audio? Yeah, it shouldn't be a lot higher. Going from 9 to 12 is a minor tweak. That's a little bit better. That's actually closer to where it was originally. Okay, that's reasonable. Let's turn that off. That's a little bit better, but I think it fits better with what we were trying to do, what I was trying to do. If you've attended one of my study groups in the past, you've already gone through, you've heard a certain volume level, and I'm trying to get that level again without clipping. I don't want it to go so high that now test. No, it's not going to clip no matter what I do. So that part is working the way I'd like. I think that's probably as high as I want to go on that. So it's that works pretty well. Okay. Well, so ends the sort of demonstration of this weird world I live in with all of these different moving parts. You change one thing, everything goes different. It all changes on the screen. All right, it's time for lunch, everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining me. Thanks for sitting through that nonsense and giving me feedback in the chat room about that audio and everything else. So that all worked out very nicely. It was a great study group today. Thanks, folks, for joining. Thanks for the chat room. Thanks for all you're doing. And we'll see you next time on the study group. Thanks, everybody.